An entitled Karen freaks out on me in the worst case of road rage I've ever seen in my life. So I decided to get some revenge by humiliating her at her job in front of all of her coworkers. Here's what happened. Okay, to start things out, I live in the country. I was driving my baby to daycare early one beautiful spring morning in 2023, and the daycare is located near the town center in a fancy little village. There is a large, widely spaced four-way stop sign at the village entrance, about half a mile from the daycare, and most of the time it's very quiet and never really busy. On said morning, I was talking to my baby about the day. I went through the stop intersection, and shortly thereafter, I noticed a car tailgating me very aggressively and honking their horn. Now, this is while we're going through a residential village at like 20 miles an hour, but I just brushed it off, thinking the person was just in a rush or had a bad morning of some kind. I thought nothing of it because I was about to get out of their way by pulling into the daycare's driveway. Well, suddenly, they turned in after me, so I got a little bit scared. But once they pulled in next to me, that's when I really got scared. I unbuckle my baby, talking to her calmly because I don't know what's about to happen, when suddenly this entitled Karen jumps out of her car and starts screaming at me at full volume. Mind you, it's 7:45 in the morning on a beautiful day, so I was so surprised. Apparently, I cut her off at the four-way stop sign, and I replied by saying, "Oh, so that's why you were tailgating me," which is an inflammatory remark, I guess, but honestly, I had just figured it out, and I was congratulating myself. I didn't intend to be rude. I immediately apologized, saying I didn't realize, but she kept screaming at me in front of my baby, and she literally wouldn't stop. I was completely confused as to why she was so upset. I will admit that I'm not a morning person, so I wasn't firing on all cylinders. I then apologized a few more times, and then I said, "It's a beautiful day, let's just move on." I then turned my back on her and I went inside, which I guess was the wrong choice to make. Well, it turns out she was another parent at the daycare, and she went to the center director to complain about my driving, saying that I made it unsafe for her. I then got called in and they warned me to drive safer, and I was so mad. She went out of her way to make my life harder at my kid's school, so I knew that I would never forget that lady's face. Well, fast forward 2 years, and I have a doctor's appointment in the same town, and when I walk into the office, guess who's in the receptionist area? Yeah, it's the lady that screamed at me. She knew too because she wouldn't make any eye contact. I took the clipboard and I seethed for a little bit while I filled it out, trying to talk myself down, but that simply didn't work. So it turns out I'm incredibly petty because I definitely handed the clipboard back to her, and I said loudly for the whole office to hear, "Oh, I know you. Do you remember that one time when you screamed at me at 7:45 in the morning, all about a stop sign? I know I cut you off by accident, but I apologized, and it was super lame of you to scream at me in our kid's school parking lot about it. That's what pathetic people do." Well, the whole time I did this lady just stared at her keyboard. Her coworker didn't though, and neither did the other people in the waiting room. They absolutely loved it, and honestly, so did I. Man, I love it when there's like a long play of some kind of like petty revenge, because the lady in the story who screamed at the original poster absolutely had it coming. Listen, in my opinion, it is just not safe out there to approach someone about some kind of road rage incident. It really could end poorly and somebody could get hurt or worse, especially in today's day and age. Like honestly, people are crazy out there. Who knows who you're actually approaching on the street, let alone at a daycare of all places. But good for you for making this lady know exactly how rude she was being, even though you had to do it a few years later, because the way she treated you, in my opinion, is completely unacceptable. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. I recently found out that my family had been bullying my fiance for years, and now after it got exposed in front of the entire family, they are now begging for my forgiveness. And at this point, I don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so my fiance and I have been dating for 6 years. We had met each other's families several times throughout our relationship, and I thought that everything was going well on both ends. His mom and I loved each other's company, and I thought my family liked my fiance until recently. He had proposed to me 3 months ago, and we immediately started planning our wedding. I wanted to organize a dinner with his mom and my family, but my fiance strongly opposed, and this shocked me because he's usually so soft-spoken. I didn't push any further because he didn't feel like talking about it, and we planned to tell both of them separately. We invited my parents and siblings to my house last week, and we told them about the proposal. Well, my family was silent, with my mom breaking the silence by asking me to go to another room so that they could talk. We then had a small argument, and that's when I found out that my family didn't approve of my fiance. She said they didn't say anything to me until now because they thought I would break up with him. When I asked why, she called him womanish and too feminine. I yelled at her and she yelled back, but we stopped when we heard fighting in the dining room. When I ran in, I saw my fiance punching my dad over and over, while my brothers and sisters tried to pull him off. I then helped my siblings pull my fiance off, and I tried to calm him and my dad head down. My dad and siblings told me that he just started attacking my dad out of nowhere, but my fiancé said that my dad had called him the F slur, you know, the one for gay men, and then made a joke of my fiancé's dead father. Now, I believe my fiancé, and I told them what my mom had said. A bigger argument broke out, and I kicked them out of my house. I talked with my fiancé, and he said this wasn't the first time that my family insulted him. He told me that they would belittle him for his feminine hobbies and would poke fun at his lower-paying job. He said that when we would go to my family, they would wait until I wasn't around to tell him those things, and that he just ignored it up until this point. The next morning, I called my family, and I told them about everything I found out. Now, they tried denying it, but my second oldest brother didn't seem to care and said that they did it to prove that there was something wrong with him. I then hung up the phone and I ignored their efforts to reach me afterwards. They apologized and said that they were trying to protect me. They then invited me to family counseling and said that they would try and be better. They even tried apologizing to my fiancé, but he didn't accept it. Now, I want to believe their apologies and let them back into my life, but I also don't want to hurt my fiancé. And at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Okay, I gotta be completely honest. Either you're completely oblivious to how your fiancé is actually feeling and the way he's being treated by your family, or your fiancé is a complete psychopath who snapped all of a sudden for no reason. Like, I'm willing to bet that your fiancé actually was being made fun of by your family, and you either turned a blind eye to it or you just were not paying attention. And both of those scenarios are really awful for your fiancé, because you said it yourself. Him freaking out and punching your dad in the face is so out of character for him, it's honestly not even funny. So in my mind, someone like that is not going to get pushed to the brink of their sanity unless something seriously wrong has been going on. So not only is your entire family awful and so toxic, but also it seems like everybody across the board sucks at communicating. And I'm talking about you, your fiancé, and the rest of your family. Allegedly, this has been going on for years, and your fiancé didn't say anything about it. Like, if I had a partner whose family was doing that to me, the first second that happened, I would have gone to my fiancé and been like, hey, wait a second. These people are being really mean to me. You need to make this stop. I wouldn't put up with it for several years and not say anything. Also, your family is pretty awful as well. They literally have been trashing this guy to his face while you're not around, and then have decided not to say anything, and only once you've gotten engaged are they like, okay, we wanted to talk to you about this. And it's like, no, you didn't. You didn't actually care at all. You just wanted to put my fiancé down, and that's it. So truly, everybody across the board in this story really sucks, and hopefully this works out for you guys in some kind of way. Because in my opinion, your fiancé does not deserve this level of negligence or verbal mistreatment, because the way he's been treated is absolutely unacceptable. My toxic assistant manager treated me and the rest of my coworkers like crap, even going as far as telling me to shut my mouth and do as I'm told. So one day I decided to maliciously comply by following her orders exactly as described, and thus proving once and for all how stupid she truly was. Here's what happened. When I was in college, I worked as a baker in a well-known regional bagel and sandwich chain. At some point, an assistant manager transferred to my store who was the stereotypical petty, power-tripping, ridiculous manager that you would find in this type of job. Her specialty was yelling at and berating employees in front of customers, and I will never not believe that she enjoyed publicly humiliating people. It was tolerable all the way until I agreed to cover a shift at the store she transferred from. Someone there asked me what I thought of her, and I thought I was careful, as I just commented that she had very high expectations, which were very hard for some people to meet, and that was the understatement of the year. Well, this lovely person passed this back to her, which put me at the top of her list. What followed was a series of write-ups for egregious violations, like missing some seeds when mopping the floor, or not emptying a garbage can that had a single paper towel in it. Luckily for me, I was one of the few people there certified to run the ovens. My opportunity for malicious compliance came one Saturday lunchtime when a charter bus pulled up to our store. Now, I had seen this before, and I knew that a bus full of people buying sandwiches is equivalent to 2 to 3 people bringing bagels to work, which is barely a blip compared to morning rush. I went to the counter to help, and Miss Assistant Manager yells at me to get back into the kitchen and start baking more. I tried to tell her we were fine, but as soon as I opened my mouth, she yelled at me and said, "Shut your mouth, do what I told you, and don't stop baking until I say stop." Now, 2 important things to know here. First of all, when I took my certification test, they told me I passed it with the second fastest time on record for the local franchise. The second thing is that the ovens were adjustable. You could turn up the heat to speed up the cooking process. I went back to the baking area and I cranked up the oven and I baked as fast as I possibly could. The ovens had 8 shelves holding about 48 bagels each. Eventually, I had them all filled up and was only slowed down by how fast I could cook them and how fast I could send them up front. Miss Assistant Manager was down at the register this entire time and was not paying attention to the stock levels in the bagel bins, but I kept bringing out shelf after shelf. At one point, the bins were overflowing, so I had to start putting them in extra bins that we had in the back, and once those were full, bagel, I started putting them in and on metal trays. The crowd finally died down, and Miss Assistant Manager finally looks at the bagel bins and realizes she never told me to stop. She then asked me if there was anything still baking, and I informed her that every shelf was full. She then lost it and started yelling that I was getting fired until multiple people pointed out that I just did exactly what she asked. The store manager ended up coming in, and pretty much everyone told them the exact same story. Mrs. Assistant Manager had to bag up the mountains of excess bagels and then drive them to all the other stores in the area just so they wouldn't go to waste. Even after that, we still exceeded the allowed wastage for the day, and she was the one that got reprimanded. Now, she still yelled at everyone after that, but she was, at the very least, a bit more careful with her wording. Yeah, I can't stand managers who act like that, who come in with this awful attitude and treat you and the rest of the employees like garbage. Like, seriously, that's so rude, it's not even fair. And the way she talked to you, like, my God. Anyone who would tell me to shut my mouth and do what I'm told, that's the second we're gonna have problems. Like, I'm sorry, I don't care who you are. And this is literally just a bagel and sandwich shop. Like, it's not that important of a job. So for her to act like this is honestly just some weird power trip. But overall, I love the way you handle this, because I think in a roundabout way, you showed this lady exactly how stupid she was acting. An entitled jerk screams at me and the rest of my staff after he doesn't get exactly what he wants, shouting that he wants his accounts canceled right now as he's not getting the service that he demands. So I decide to maliciously comply by doing exactly that and canceling all of his accounts, resulting in one of the biggest blowups I've ever seen in my life. Here's what happened. Okay, so I work as a support manager for a company that sells credit card readers and other services for processing money. Our story starts with a phone call that one of our newest staff members received. The caller does not introduce themselves and instead loudly demands to speak to no less than the CEO of the company and will not give any information aside from his repeated demands and some indirect swearing. Normally, this would earn them a terminated call, but I want to know who has the guts to scream at my staff, so I have him transferred over. Having had some of these calls before, I introduce myself with a very fancy title and ensure the caller that whatever his support needs are, I can handle them without any kind of issue. The CEO is busy at the moment, and I'm the next person in line in the support organization. Now, this is not entirely true, but it really works to calm people down and get them to tell me what is actually the problem. Now, the caller in this story is called Steve, and not just any Steve, mind you, but Steve, the owner of Steve's Cafe. And not just one Steve's Cafe, mind you, but the owner of all 7 of Steve's Cafe. Steve is apparently offended that he was given to me and not the CEO like he demanded. He is the owner, you see, and he needs to talk to the owner and not me. Because, you know, I don't own 7 cafes, and I certainly don't own my company. So I just simply cannot understand Steve's needs and can't make the hard choices he needs made. But I again assure him that I do have the position and authority to do anything he requires. I am the manager of the support department. I can make any changes that he requires. I can set up new accounts or order new devices, anything that he might need. He only needs to tell me his problem and I can provide the solution. I will support him. Well, his next words are immediate and aggressive. Can you cancel my accounts? Well, yes, I can. I inform him that we need a written request to cancel, and I also try to inquire why he needs to cancel his accounts. This is a standard procedure. If he wants to cancel his accounts, then we close his accounts, but any feedback is also useful. Is he leaving because our product was bad, because our service was bad, or because he found a better deal? But before I can even get a few words out of him, he shouts again, "Have the CEO call me. He has my number." And then he disconnects the call. Well, I report this up the chain, and I get back that no email means no cancellation, but still the bosses need to know. First thing the next morning, I get invited to an emergency meeting by the CEO, as well as a few other important people. We go over what happened, and then I'm shown an email. Steve managed to find the CEO's internal email address and sent him an email complaining about one of his 7 stores having a horrible time with the product. He is demanding no less than the cancellation of all of his accounts and a refund for 3 months of payments he has made for each, as the product is totally unusable. I check the logs and the problem location does indeed have a problem. That started yesterday morning. They are not down, but they are having a bad time. There are no emails or calls informing us, just the screaming cancellation request. I send over the call logs and we listen to Steve scream, as well as curse at the support agent before he got sent over to me. And then I hear the words that cue my malicious compliance: cancel my accounts. The meeting goes quiet. The CEO has spoken, and we cancel all 7 accounts and shut down services. They then start their day with devices that do not work. But once the calls come in, the CEO makes another decision. They say that the account is canceled and that we need to follow procedure. So each manager calls me frantically, explaining that nothing is working, but the staff apologetically tell them that their account was canceled per their owner's email and that we can no longer provide any support. Shortly thereafter, the owner calls in and once again is screaming to turn them back on. on. Uncancel them this instant. Get the devices working because he is losing money. I check with the CEO, and after receiving a nod, I say, well, per your request made over the phone yesterday and your email this morning, your accounts have been canceled. At this point, Steve just gets madder and says he didn't mean to actually cancel them. He just wanted to let us know what would happen if we didn't fix his issue. He then continues to yell. I let the CEO know, and at his request, I transfer Steve to his office phone. Now, I wish there was a satisfying ending to this story, but Steve and our boss did talk it over. Steve was informed that his behavior was unacceptable, and Steve admitted that he was expecting expedited service and possibly a discount when he threatened to cancel, and basically said he didn't really want to cancel his accounts. He just wanted support to take him seriously and transfer him up the chain so that he could get faster, better service. Now, obviously, there was no real apology, though both I and the initial support agent were told that Steve would behave himself from now on and to report if he didn't. Services were then resumed and all 7 locations were opened a bit late. The one location that did have issues yesterday got on the phone with a support agent and were sorted out in a reasonable amount of time, and all is right in heaven and earth. But I do hope Steve learned that threatening to cancel your account sometimes leads to you actually getting your account canceled and not some kind of discount like you were expecting in the beginning. Okay, I'm gonna say what we're all thinking. I hate Steve and I hate the CEO. I hate Steve because he actually got away with treating the staff like garbage, and I hate the CEO because he literally let this slide. That guy is a massive piece of crap, and I can't believe he allowed that to happen. Seriously, you let your staff get treated like garbage, and you allowed this guy to come back in as some kind of client of yours? Like, do you not care about the well-being of the people who are literally taking care of your business? Like, that is disgusting. I can't stand managers who act like that, or customers who try to be like, oh, you should cancel my accounts, I can't stand you, only to then freak out and be like, well, I didn't actually mean it. Why'd you actually think I was serious? You know, it's not like you were screaming and like cursing on the phone at people. That wouldn't be a good indicator that you're pissed off and you want to cancel your service. It's like, come on, like that is so weird and so dumb. In my opinion, and I really think this is true, the way you treat people in customer service, whether you're the owner or a customer of some kind, absolutely reflects the kind of person you are on the inside. And trust me, I get it. I know that everybody has a bad customer service experience where the person trying to serve you is not doing a good job and they really suck at their job. They're lazy, they don't care, and they're just not doing what they need to do. But I would seriously argue that that's just an outlier situation and that most people just want to do their job, get money, and go home. Like at the end of the day, we're all just trying to make rent. And if you treat me with respect, I guarantee you will get it back. That's my philosophy at least. Maybe you feel differently. And if you do, please leave a comment down below. I would love to hear what you have to say. But overall, I think Steve sucks and so does the CEO. And the fact that this situation didn't result in Steve getting banned, in my opinion, is incredibly upsetting. Am I the jerk for walking away from a friend-owned business after they literally tried to take advantage of my work while giving me no respect and no reward for my efforts? Because right now they're saying I'm a bad friend, and at this point I don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so I've been friends with someone for a while now, and they came up with an idea for an app and asked me to develop it. They are handling the business side of things, while I'm responsible for the entire technical department. At first, I was willing to help out, but things quickly started to feel off when we discussed how we would split the rewards. The situation became really frustrating when they suggested I would only receive a small portion of the rewards for my work while they took the majority of it. They argued that since the idea was theirs, they deserved more. I felt like they didn't understand the amount of work that goes into developing an app, and it was as if they were devaluing my skills while saying things like, I could just learn this on my own, or even saying, I can handle the business side, and that's the important part. It honestly really bothered me. They seemed to believe that the idea that they came up with was somehow worth all the effort and technical skill I'd put into the actual building of it. Over time, I started feeling completely unappreciated, like they thought of me as more of a tool to execute their idea rather than an equal partner in the process. Every time I brought up concerns, they would brush them off or act like I was overreacting. They made me feel small, like I was the one who should be grateful for the opportunity to help them. They even made it sound like I should just be happy to do the work and accept whatever I was given, no matter how unfair. Eventually, I realized that I wasn't being treated with respect, and so I decided to walk away. Now, they're saying I'm a bad friend and that I let them down, but honestly, I couldn't stay in a situation where I was being undervalued and disrespected. So seriously, am I the jerk for not accepting a deal that would basically leave me working for peanuts while they walk away with all the credit and reward? Because right now, I'm incredibly frustrated and I don't know what to do. Oh man, this is so toxic, it's not even funny. These people literally took advantage of your skill set just to use you to make money on their side of things. And it's ironic because these people say, oh yeah, we're gonna handle the business side of things. And it's like, oh, okay, you're gonna handle that side of it, but what about my side of it? You literally would have nothing if I didn't develop the app in the first place. Like, Like, you're the one with the technical skills, and if anything, you're the one that could learn their business side of things and not the other way around. Not in a million years could they do what you're doing. That's why they brought you on board, because they know they can't and don't want to do it. And that really is the truth in my opinion. So the fact that they're not giving you more credit for what you're literally building for them, like, that is honestly insane in my opinion, and that goes so much further than just putting your name on the application. This involves a monetary split, and guess what? You have every right to expect more out of them. So no, you are definitely not the jerk for walking away from these idiots, because in my opinion, they 100% were taking advantage of you, and you definitely did not deserve that. An entitled worker refuses me access to their gym, claiming that I was sick after I stepped outside just to cool down. But in reality, I had been working out at the gym for an hour before he showed up, and all of my stuff was in the locker. But despite my protests, he would not allow me to get my stuff, and instead demanded that I leave. Here's what happened. Since the New Year swarm is still all up in my gym at the moment, I've been getting up very early and going in at around 4:30 in the morning. I can deal with needing toothpicks to keep my eyes open if it means I don't need to queue up for a bench. Something that's relevant to the story, my gym is part of a chain, and a separate location wound up getting into some serious trouble because a bunch of people going there all caught the plague. Corporate came down with a decree for all locations. Scan the membership, check the temperature on your forehead before being allowed entry. So I show up at 4:30 in the morning, stow my stuff away, and do the first half of my workout. I'm doing some cardio along with some strength training. I don't know if this is the case with everybody, but after 45 minutes of kicking my own butt, I'm feeling a little bit warmer than I usually am, while also typically craving some sweet, sweet nicotine. Vaping indoors is frowned upon, and it's bloody cold outside, what with it being January in New England. So this is a two birds with one stone kind of situation. I grab my vape and my phone, and I walk around outside for a little bit without a coat. I wind up chilling out real quick and decide I don't need much more nicotine. So I scurry inside, and there's a new face behind the desk, a younger looking dude I've never seen before in my life. I show him the vape, and I explain that I was just getting some air, and he says I still need to scan your card and check your temperature. Well, no point in crabbing at the kid over corporate policy, so I let him scan my card, and then he uses the thermometer and says that I am not allowed to enter the gym because apparently I'm running a fever. I look at him and I say, dude, you really think I just worked up a sweat somehow in the freezing cold and didn't show up with a gym bag, never mind a jacket in this weather? But he looks at me and he says, I don't make the policy, sir. I just enforce it. I'm gonna need you to leave. So I look at him and I say, okay, sure. Can I grab my stuff from my locker? I guess I'll just shower at home. And before I could continue explaining where my stuff was, this guy chimes in and says, sir, you need to vacate the premises immediately. You are at risk of infecting other people. I look at him and I say, there's a difference between overheated and feverish. I didn't have a fever when I came in an hour ago, so I did a bunch of stuff that made me sweat. Pretty sure that'll increase my body temperature. How about you call your manager over or have someone grab my stuff from the locker? But this guy simply wasn't getting it, as he looked at me and said, sir, you need to leave the building immediately. You are risking infecting other people. So I responded, yeah, you can repeat yourself as many times as you'd like, but I'm not going home without my stuff. Now, would you like to call a manager over, or should I call the police and have them explain this to you? It was at this point that he put a finger to his earpiece and summoned building security. Right around the time the woman who let me in the first time came out of the bathroom with a look on her face that said, what is actually going on? She gives me a dazzling customer service smile, looks at me and says, what seems to be the problem? We start talking at the same time, with this guy claiming that I'm infected and need to leave, while I'm also saying that I just want to get my stuff and leave. She cuts us both off and points at me. She says, you go first. I look at her and I say, the guy scanned my card and says I can't get my stuff because my temperature is too high. She gives me a curious look. She said, your temperature was fine when you came in earlier today. What happened? Oh, that's right. You stepped out, didn't you? Thankfully, she recognized who I was in the gym. So I responded by saying, yes, that's me. I guess I just didn't cool down long enough. She waved me through and said that I'm all set just as the large security dude was coming down the stairs to presumably eject me from the building. I didn't hear what went on between the dude who tried to give me the boot and her, but I do know the security guy took over the desk so they could have a discussion in private. After I took a swim and a shower, I thanked her for letting me back in, and she apologized on the guy's behalf. Apparently, she had to run to the bathroom real quick and grabbed a locker room attendant to cover the front desk for her. He was the only male attendant in so early, and she couldn't leave the desk, and he didn't didn't think there was anyone else who would open the lockers without knowing the code. So he felt entitled to just make me leave without my stuff because he didn't know what else to do and knew the manager wasn't available. But thankfully, she was there to save the day because I honestly don't know what I would have done if I had to leave without my property. That front desk attendant was completely out of line. I mean, talk about not knowing what you're doing or just not knowing in general how to approach anybody in public. Like, this guy clearly was working out and he was clearly coming back in from the outside. I mean, his stuff was in the locker and this guy was acting like he was breaking the law, calling security as if this guy is some kind of disturbance. So hopefully this employee got put in their place because that is some awful customer service and there's no reason for him to act like that in the slightest. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. A group of entitled customers don't pay their full bill and leave before I get the chance to collect their check, taking with them both copies of the receipt and completely stiffing me out of a $120 bill. Here's what happened. So I work at a semi-high-end restaurant where the average bill for 2 people is about $80 to $100 pre-tip depending on what they order. Tonight, these 3 girls got sat in my section. They were young, like very early 20s, which can sometimes be a red flag at our restaurant as we get a lot of teenagers and very young people who will order water and the cheapest menu items and then tip like $2. Or they order a bunch of stuff and then are shocked at the total price and then don't have any money for a tip. I'm not judging or anything, and definitely not saying that all young customers are like this, as I am young myself, but it does happen fairly often. Regardless, I gave them great service, as I always try my best to do so. I even made a cute little ice cream dessert with whipped cream and candles for one of the girls because they said it was her birthday. They ended up ordering a decent amount, 2 appetizers and 3 of our cheaper entrees, and at the end of it, their bill was about $120. They asked for 1 check, so I brought it out to them. One of the girls handed me some cash as well as a credit card. She said to me, "Here's $80 for part of the bill, and then please put the rest on the card." So I go up and I start counting the cash, and I realize that it's $65, not $80. I counted a couple more times to check, and yep, it really is $65. I return to the table to let them know. They gave me a weird look. Then one of them says, "Oh, we must have counted it wrong. Well, I guess it's $65 then." So I apply the $65 to their bill, swipe the card for the rest, then bring them their receipt and tell them thank you and good night. They left about 10 minutes later. I didn't actually see them get up and leave because I was taking care of another table. Well, as you can probably guess, it turns out that when they left, they not only took the merchant copy of the receipt, they also took the check presenter book with them. At first, I thought maybe another server or a busser had accidentally grabbed it, but I asked everyone and we searched everywhere, including the trash cans, but to no avail, we couldn't find it. The only explanation was that they took the merchant copy and check presenter. They didn't leave any cash on the table either, so I was completely stiffed on a $120 bill. If they didn't have enough money to tip, I would understand. I just don't understand why they felt the need to take the entire check presenter. Part of me is worried that they thought I stole the $15 difference from the supposed $80 in cash and somehow lied about it only being $65, and that's why they didn't tip me. And now I really just hope they don't think that of me, because I would never do something like that, and I honestly just want to do a good job. This is the first time this has ever happened to me, where they've taken the merchant copy with them to avoid leaving a tip. However, something like this happened to one of my coworkers on a $300 check a couple of weeks ago, and he was incredibly upset. But either way, this is such a weird situation, and I wish I was able to catch them before they walked out the door. That really is weird in my opinion. Like, if you're gonna go out to a restaurant and you're gonna eat all this food and have all this service sent your way, the least you can do is not only be ready to pay for what you order, but also be ready to give a tip. Some of these restaurant workers literally don't make that much money at all, so they really rely on tips just to try and make ends meet in their life, and it really does make a difference. And I bet they were probably hoping that you didn't count out the cash and realize that they were giving you $65 instead of $80. That's like the only reason I can think of that they would take everything with them and basically avoid paying you anything. So hopefully those people never come back to your restaurant ever again, because what they did is so dishonest, and it's simply irresponsible and so disrespectful to order so much food and then get out of there before paying your bill. I broke up with my boyfriend yesterday after he crossed my boundaries and continued to talk to his ex-girlfriend, but now I feel like I made a massive mistake, and I feel horrible for breaking up with him, and now I don't know what to do. So a few years ago, I met my boyfriend on Tinder by the name of John. That's not his real name. It was my first time dating someone from Tinder or even meeting someone online. We immediately hit it off and quickly discovered that we had a lot of interests in common. We both had come out of a very long relationship with our other ex and both had a lot of baggage as a result of it. On my end, I was engaged to someone and we ended things due to my ex cheating on me multiple times, as well as lying about it. For him, they broke it off because he realized that they weren't compatible and he was essentially settling for someone that he had no chemistry with. He had admitted that he cheated on his ex during this time and regrets it immensely. We are both pet owners and have niche careers that involve on his end some last-minute travel. I'm lucky that I live with my parents and they're able to watch my cats for me. I used to have a puppy with my ex, but when we broke up, he took the dog and I never saw him again. John, on the other hand, lives alone with his dog and the rest of his family lives about 16 hours away from me in Canada. It's hard for John to get help watching his dog if he has to travel. At the beginning of our relationship, he discussed with me the arrangement that we had with his ex-girlfriend. When he got his corgi, his ex-girlfriend by the name of Brittany was extremely involved in raising and taking care of the dog. And after they broke up, they agreed that she could babysit the dog a few times a month. And when John travels, since Brittany misses the dog and was essentially the dog's second owner for 3 years, he would allow her to come and see that dog. He also felt that it was cruel to deny Brittany the ability to see a dog that she had raised since it was just a puppy. When discussing this, I told him that I understand the need for the arrangement since I was not yet comfortable with caring for his dog that early on. But I also made it clear that if we continue to progress forward, that arrangement will need to come to an end at a certain point. As our relationship progressed, I wanted to show that I could be someone he could rely on. So I started asking if I could watch his dog when he went on his weekend exercises for work, or if I could babysit the dog for the day while he worked long shifts. And things were going really well, but he was still letting the ex babysit the dog too. At this point, Brittany would call him and ask if she could have the corgi dropped off, and he would drop everything just to do that. I felt that this was starting to cross boundaries on his end and that Brittany was taking advantage of him. I also suspected that she still had feelings for John. With my history of being cheated on multiple times in a lot of horrible ways, I began to feel threatened and jealous. I didn't like the person I was when the conversation of her popped up. When I began to feel uncomfortable about the arrangement, I told him that time is starting to come where I can't move forward more with her still involved. When discussing, we made a plan that he would phase her out over the course of 3 months and tell her that he's been seeing someone. He also started pushing back a bit when this came up. He kept saying he thought that this was cruel and would tell me how devastated he would be if the situation were opposite. My counter argument every time was that for one, it's a dog. The dog will get over it and will be fine. It's not a child. And while it is nice that you're choosing to do this for her, unfortunately, by allowing her access to the dog, you're keeping a door open for her. Also, Brittany is a grown woman and has a big girl job where she can adopt her own dog. Eventually, she will also get over this situation. But most of all, it makes me uncomfortable. If this arrangement is that important to him, I understand, but I'm walking out. I don't want to be constantly fighting for attention or trying to figure out who gets to babysit the dog with an ex of 6 years. Finally, in September, he told me that he cut her off. We continued to progress and fall even more for each other. Life was amazing, and we even began talking about moving in with each other. On Friday night, I went to his apartment after work to pick up his dog while he's away for the weekend. I borrowed his laptop to look at something on my Gmail and ended up finding a picture he took of him and his ex hiking together the day before on Google Photos. I was heartbroken. I was convinced I was cheated on and that this was the beginning spiral of it. When I confronted him, he told me that he just couldn't bring himself to do it when the time came to cut her off. He felt that he had hurt Brittany so badly in the past that he was scared to hurt her again. It turns out he had been lying to me for months, and she had been secretly watching the dog this entire time. He explained that it started off with a white lie until it spun out of control, and he didn't know how to get out of the situation without hurting or upsetting either of us. It also turns out she didn't even know that I existed, which I found out when I called her. I broke up with him on the spot. I told him my boundaries. I explained multiple times over multiple months why I was uncomfortable with this. I also stated multiple times that I cannot be in a relationship with this dynamic and would break up if we don't take this step. He still chose to not cut her off. I feel betrayed and like I can't trust him anymore. When breaking up, he kept saying that he didn't realize I was this serious and he thought that we would work through secret when it finally came out, or he would have gotten the guts to cut her off by then. His apologies are sincere, and it is evident that he is distraught over the realization of how badly this has affected our relationship. It's now been a few days and I feel horrible. I've lost my best friend and all I can think about is calling him to apologize and get back together. I miss him so much. I'm worried I overreacted and maybe this is too harsh, but I also stated my boundary and he disrespected it over multiple months while lying to me in the process. A big part of the reason I chose to break up with him is because I cannot see a way to move forward. I don't know how to rebuild the trust in our relationship. Every other aspect of our relationship is phenomenal, and I truly thought he was the person I'd be with forever. I'm so sad. I feel that I made a mistake and should have worked through this instead of just cutting him off. So I'm now at a loss and I truly don't know what to do. I can kind of understand where the original poster is coming from, but it really does seem like he was straight up cheating on you. Like, why would he take some kind of selfie picture with this lady if he's already in a relationship with you and he had already supposedly cut this lady off? It's also mighty convenient that he lives about 16 hours away, so it really does seem like he was trying to live some kind of double life, keeping Brittany around to take care of his dog while also having you to be the loving girlfriend who was clearly just a side girlfriend for him to pick up whenever he felt like it. That is so disrespectful to you, and just like you said, this violated all of your boundaries, so I completely understand why you broke up with him. I wouldn't feel bad about this. His true colors came through, and you saw him for the liar that he really is. And to top it all off, this Brittany lady, she didn't even know that you existed. There's a good chance that she thought she was gonna probably get back together with John. I mean, it's pretty suspicious now that you have the full story as to why she would go on a hike with their dog with just the two of them, because I'm betting if she knew that you were around, she probably would not have been a part of this in the slightest. If anything, you've uncovered that John is unfaithful and that he clearly can't be trusted, so I think you got off the hook in a major way. Just imagine if you got married to this guy and this Brittany lady was still around. John was incredibly dishonest with you, he was not forthcoming and truthful, and you found out the hard way, and it really sucks. But in my opinion, if I was in your shoes, I would take this as a clear red flag that you honestly do not want to be with this guy. He can't be trusted, he's going to lie to you, and he clearly was using you as some kind of side chick. And no matter how you feel, I truly think you deserve a lot better than that. My dad makes my life hard ever since I started talking to my mom again, who kicked me out several years ago, and everything is such a big mess at this point, I honestly don't know what to do. So for a bit of context, both of my parents were not very good parents to me. I'm an 18-year-old female, and my mom was a mom who would really be very controlling, especially when it came to what I ate and what I chose to wear, as well as how I did my hair growing up. She would yell a lot and was overall just incredibly stressful to be around. She kicked me out when I was nearing the age of 15, saying that she had had enough. Meanwhile, she also did this to my two other siblings. I went to stay at my dad's, and my dad and I saw each other once a week before this, but we weren't really close. He doesn't speak to me, and I don't speak to him. It's that type of thing. I spoke to my stepmom a lot, but then I saw that she had sent a text message to her friend saying how annoying I was, so that relationship soured almost immediately. My stepmom isn't from my country, so when COVID laws lifted, she went back to her country for 2 weeks at a time, coming back for 1 week. I'm nearing the end of 16 at this point, and in those 2 weeks that she was away, my dad told me it was my job to keep the house tidy, especially as he worked. I told him that I go to college every day. I get up earlier than him, and I get home a lot later than he does. I don't want to be cleaning the whole house by myself. But with no surprise, he didn't really listen to me. Keep in mind, by the way, that my dad did nothing for me. For my 17th birthday, he went with my stepmom to his favorite restaurant, a steakhouse, even though I'm a vegetarian. What I'm trying to get across is that he just doesn't really think about me, and I just accepted that I didn't really have a relationship with him, and we were really more like roommates. Each morning, I'd be given a list of things to do, from mopping to cleaning his bedroom, to changing his bed sheets and cleaning the kitchen, stuff like that. I found this incredibly stressful, because if I didn't have it all done in 2 hours, he would start shouting at me. Now, I don't take well to being shouted at, and I tend to close off pretty quickly if someone does that. Days out with my friends ended up being us cleaning the house together, because if it wasn't clean when he came home, he would start yelling again. I tried to bring this stress up to my grandparents and my stepmom, but they did nothing in the house, and they left it all to me, including cooking my own food. He gave me no spending money at all, and if I took any, he would count it beforehand. We did not have a father-daughter relationship before this, and I didn't take to him parenting me. He was honestly just a stranger, and I felt like I was a live-in maid, quite literally at that. This went on for about a year until I literally couldn't take the stress of missing my mom. Also, my college work was becoming too much, and keeping the house tidy all by myself was just starting to weigh on me. I dropped out of college because I was falling so far behind. I decided to get a job in this time because I didn't want to be doing nothing for 4 to 5 months at a time. So I started working about 30 hours a week. The following year came along, and I needed about $400 to enroll into college. I'm not close with my dad, as I said, so I asked my stepmom if she might be able to ask him about it. And this was in July, and she never got back to me. For some more context, in May, I started to speak with my mother again. We had not spoken at all in 2 years. My dad disliked the fact that I was speaking to her again. In August, I wouldn't go to her house, but then we ended up having a big heart-to-heart in the car where we got it all out, and I ended up sleeping at her house. So I slept at her house for a few nights in a row, maybe a week. I sent a text message of where I was, but then I decided they knew where I was, and there wasn't much point in texting every night. I see now that this annoyed them. At the time, it was innocent, but when September came around and college started back up, my dad decided at this point he would not be paying for my bus pass. I'd been sleeping at my mom's house, so now I just lived at hers. I didn't feel right asking my mom, a few months into meeting her again, for $400. My dad said he'd only pay for half of it as he considered himself to be split custody now. My stepmom said that she'd never stick for that and that she would give the money back if she were me. So I did, and I ended up paying for the bus pass from my money I saved up from work. I feel I can't really forgive my dad for this. I called him nasty names, the worst of them being that I called him a part-time dad. Eventually, I stopped speaking to him when we had a huge argument over all of this, and I basically screamed the house down, saying how bad of a dad he really was. I left him a letter with my feelings, which he replied back saying that it was a total joke. This whole situation is messy, and I honestly don't know what to do. I really think, based on what you've described, your parents are objectively terrible parents. There's no other way to put it. They seriously have not taken care of you growing up, and they've left you to basically jump back and forth between the two of them, trying to find some kind of footing so that you can grow up and move on with your life, which honestly is exactly what you need to do. And I don't say that to be condescending. It just seems like your parents are not going to support you, and I think you need to understand that moving forward. There will always be some kind of excuse that will prevent them from giving you some kind of aid, whether calling you a total joke or just refusing to pay for anything from you. But even if they do, you can bet that there's always going to be some passive-aggressive response, as they only pay for half of something they easily could pay for in full. So let this be the motivation you need to work towards living on your own and finding your own place to live in. You will probably see so much of a difference in your life when you are the one who's paying for the stuff in your life, because it really sounds like your parents failed you, but at least with some hard work, you can pick up where they clearly dropped the ball. An entitled racist Karen makes some outlandish statements after she calls our call center just trying to cause some havoc, but the management team was not having it, as this entitled Karen was put in her place in a beautiful fashion. And after that, she never called our office ever again. Here's what happened. So almost 20 years ago, I worked the 1-800 support hotline for my country's government financial aid for college applications. It gave me lots of memories of Karens and their outrageous claims, as well as their crazy demands. But the lady in this story that I'm going to share was the boss of all Karens. So literally anyone could call this number, but we could terminate the call if they got aggressive or combative, or were obviously not calling in good faith unless they had an application on file for the current year, in which case we had to listen to whatever they said the whole time. We could escalate the call to a supervisor only if they started making explicit comments that would be considered an aggressive move. But the entitled boss Karen of this story, she came prepared. I found out later that she had filed an application every year, despite having no children or intentions of attending college herself at the age of 68. As she put it to me, she is a taxpayer and therefore pays my salary, and therefore she is entitled to take up as much of our time as she well pleases. But before I go any further, I just want to say that this lady really was awful. She made some awful comments and generalization based on groups of people, and it really was a terrible experience overall. So it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and my supervisor gave me a heads up that more crazy people call on this day because we're the only government line that's actually open. I'm an hour or two into the morning, and the call beeps through into my headset. So I start out with my normal greeting. I say to them, "Thank you for calling. My name is such and such. To get started, I'll need your social security number so we can pull up your application." And yes, asking for this in the the opener did cause us a lot of grief, but the script is the script. This entitled Karen snarls out her numbers with the kind of enunciation that we all become familiar with from YouTube videos of rabid boomer Karens confronting minimum wage employees over mask requirements. So it's not like I don't know the call was going to be a nightmare, but I was young and I was so naive, and I truly had no idea what I was getting into with this entitled Karen. I pull up her file, and at the same time that I asked her what we can do for her today, I see that the file iteration number is at 99. That's the top limit, meaning that she has called about that year's application at least 99 times in the last month alone. She answers by saying, "What you can help me with is what I demand to know. Why is it that I can't cash my check today, all because some stupid uppity got himself shot?" Now, when she said this, I just sat there stunned with a slight stammer, and my supervisor must have seen my face because she comes over, glances at my screen, and says, "Oh yeah, I was hoping I would get this lady today. Send her to me." I say in my best bright and helpful customer service voice, "Ma'am, that is a very good question, and that deserves to be addressed by someone higher up than me. Would you mind if I send you over to my boss?" You can hear her over the phone as she huffs and puffs, stating that yes, I can transfer her, but that I'd better not put her on hold forever. So I hit the transfer button with glee, and I logged my break code to go watch the show go down. My supervisor, as well as every other supervisor on contract, aside from one other white woman who was gone that day, was a college-educated black woman who tolerated no BS. So it didn't take long until this entitled Karen demands to speak with her boss. My supervisor says very sweetly, "Would you like to speak directly with the executive in charge of this entire call center?" And of course, the entitled Karen can't resist that sort of bait. Our executive director, of course, spoke fluent corporate, and his English was flawless. Usually, he retained only a hint of his African accent, but for special occasions, he would dial it all the way up. I would have given anything to listen in on that conversation, but all I got to hear was a bunch of laughter, and there was a lot of that, and it started well before the call ended. While I never did have to deal with that Karen again, when she quit calling us, she switched over to the Medicare line, and they already had enough to deal with. But I like to think the shock and outrage knocked a few years off of her useless, miserable life, and honestly, I'm so glad that my manager put her in her place. What an absolute serious piece of garbage. Like, this lady is just straight up racist. There's no other way of putting it. The fact that she would say that on the specific day that this incident took place is more than enough proof of this lady's ignorance. I mean, there is no good excuse to act that way, and this lady seriously should be ashamed of herself. So good for management for putting her in her place, because this type of behavior is absolutely atrocious, and there is no excuse in the book that would ever excuse this entitled Karen's actions. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My boyfriend has cheated on me in the past, and now I'm having trouble getting over it, and I honestly don't know what to do. So my boyfriend and I moved in together after 9 months. It's now coming up to a year of us being together, and for some background, I was previously married and split with my husband before we got together, but have had boyfriends in the past. My boyfriend, on the other hand, has only had one girlfriend who was a bit older, and they were only together for about 6 months in 2021. Around 6 months into our relationship, I went on his phone while he was showering and saw he still had Tinder downloaded. I looked and I saw that he didn't have any messages, but was worried that he had cheated on me. So I decided I would bait him and made a fake Tinder profile. That night, he matched with me and messaged implying that he would like to hook up and started planning a day. After about 10 minutes, the messages stopped, and when I confronted him, he said he wasn't thinking with his brain, and when he snapped out of it, he stopped. He apologized profusely, and we talked about what he could do to earn my trust back, which included outlining what cheating was, and that included exchanging pictures or chatting with someone else. He also reassured me that it wasn't my fault and that he was an idiot, and I finally began trusting him again when we moved in together. The day after I moved in, I was being snoopy again, and I looked on his phone. I found kick messages where he was doing very inappropriate things, as well as interacting with people in a way that was incredibly uncomfortable and quite disgusting, and it makes me very uncomfortable. In some of the messages, he also exchanged pictures and videos, which really hurt, as we had set this as a no-go boundary. So when I talked about it, I was so sad that he decided the rules on what cheating was. He was very sorry again and said that it wouldn't happen again. Now, it happened a few times the week before, but it seriously did not get to him. him. I asked if he felt guilty, and he said that he felt guilty that I was hurt, but not guilty about doing it, because he didn't intend on actually cheating on me. Recently, he was on his phone, and I was next to him, and I saw his browser history, and just to keep things family friendly, it was basically scandalous sites that also allowed you to hook up with other people. Now this was playing on my mind, so a few days later, I asked him to log in so I could check, and there were no messages in his inbox. But I'm still not convinced that he hadn't been deleting stuff, as he's been doing that since I caught him last time. I start therapy next week, and I'm hoping that will help. I don't know whether the feelings of not being enough and the lack of trust and paranoia will ever go away, or if I should just break up with him. I have trust issues anyways, and nothing in my life has ever crushed me like this before. Plus, I'm well aware he's a good liar, and he's good at hiding things, so that makes it worse. I just feel absolutely devastated and broken. I also feel bad for not getting over it, even though it's been a few months, but I'm still so hurt. Other than this, he is my absolute hero. He always puts me first, and he cares for me so much. It's the healthiest relationship I've ever been in. What boundaries can I set, and what conversations can we have to help me get over this? What should I do? I hate to say it, but this is not a healthy relationship. I mean, he has cheated on you twice. There's nothing healthy about this in the slightest, and it really does sound like you are in denial, because I hope you realize that this guy is basically shopping around online and getting with other people. There were also some pretty disturbing things that happened in this story that I left out on purpose for obvious reasons, but needless to say, this guy is not being faithful to his girlfriend, and I seriously think the original poster needs to wake up and see what's actually happening. No amount of therapy is going to stop what he is actively doing to you, and the sooner you realize that, the better off you will be. You do not deserve this kind of relationship, because from what you've described, your boyfriend is not faithful. So hopefully you can figure this out, because his attitude and his actions are incredibly disgusting, and you truly deserve much more than that. My coworker pushes aside a table ready to be seen at the restaurant that I work at, claiming that she can simply take the next one, as she takes her time to put on her makeup in the morning in the bathroom. But she doesn't realize what she's done, as I serve one of the richest members of our community, and as a result earn a fantastic tip that left everybody jealous. Here's what happened. So a couple of years ago, I was waiting tables at this restaurant in New Jersey. This story took place during our slow season, and it was pretty competitive between all the servers. Every server wanted the better section and the bigger tables, since overall, tips were lower than usual. We didn't pull our tips, and things got pretty cutthroat at times. I was doing okay financially, so I wasn't as money hungry as everyone else. I personally get anxiety, so I hate being late to things. So if my shift starts at 5, I'm walking into work at 4:45, just so I can get settled, and then clocking in at 5 o'clock to get to work. But my coworker Kayla, however, had a different attitude. She would walk into work at 5 o'clock on the dot, and clock in and then head right to the bathroom to put on her makeup, which took her about 15 minutes. On most days, it was slow enough that it wasn't an issue, but it still wasn't right. Call me old-fashioned, but when your shift starts at 5, you should start working at 5 o'clock, and not apply makeup while on the clock, while you have other duties to take care of. I've never had to deal with putting on makeup, but it just seemed to me that she should have taken more time while getting ready to come to work to put it on. I always let it slide because I'm non-confrontational, but it bothered other coworkers. However, management never got around to addressing it. One day, I walked in at my usual time, and as I clocked in at 5, I saw Kayla clock in as well and scurry off to the bathroom. I roll my eyes and I walk to the host station, where there are 2 people waiting to be seated. The host asked if Kayla was here yet because she was up for her first table in the rotation. I told her she was getting ready in the bathroom. The host rolled her eyes and went to tell her she was going to get sat. Now, we all knew that she was putting on her makeup, and we weren't going to hassle her if she was on the toilet or something like that. I didn't hear the exact back and forth that they had, but it definitely took longer than I expected. The last thing I heard Kayla say was to just hand off this table and that she will get the next one. She didn't care. So the host sauntered back to me with a big grin plastered against her face. She said to me, "You're up for this table. Do you want to help me set it up?" And at this point, I'm confused. Set it up? It's only 2 people. And that's when she says something that absolutely blows my mind. She says, "Oh no, it's a party of 14. This is Mr. Moneybags' niece and nephew. The rest of the family is on their way." For context, Mr. Moneybags, this is obviously not the real name, was a very wealthy and well-known man in our area. He made his fortunes in landscaping and then moved on to real estate. And believe it or not, he was one of the few affluent people in our area that wasn't wasn't super entitled. Me and the host set up the table in record time. Just as the rest of the party arrived, everyone began to sit down as I greeted everyone, and just as luck would have it, I gave Mr. Moneybags a handshake as I locked eyes with a very dolled up Kayla as she entered the dining room and realized what she had done to herself. The next 2 hours, I waited on my 14 top table as Kayla waited on 2 tops. She actually had a table not tip at all, which is awful and I don't condone, but in this particular situation, I found it kind of fitting. And of course, she kicked herself again when she looked over at my table's check and saw the fat tip I was getting off of my big table. But you know what? That's her loss. And the moral of the story is that you need to get ready for work before work and not right when you show up. This is a fantastic story. I love it when situations like these arise because you know what? This is absolutely Kayla's fault. She could have made so much money off of that table, but instead she was too busy in the back trying to put on her makeup at the last second when in reality, yes, she very easily could have done that at home. She has literally nobody else to blame except for herself. Whereas the original poster saw the opportunity and was there ready to take care of what needed to be done. And that is honestly what it's all about. You strike while the iron's hot and you show up right when you're needed. And who knows, when you do that, you might just get a 14 top table and make a lot of money as a result. So it's really cool that the original poster is a valuable employee. And because of their hard work, they were able to make a fantastic paycheck, all because their coworker Kayla was too lazy to get her makeup done before coming to work. My father is constantly bothering me and is weirdly obsessed with me as an individual, constantly trying to drag me back into his life, despite the fact that I never want anything to do with him ever again. And at this point, I simply don't know what to do. So to start things off, I don't like my dad. I answer his phone calls because he treats his body horrible, and I know one day it will be his last phone call. I wouldn't answer otherwise. I know it's bad, but it's just how I feel. My parents divorced 15 years ago. He convinced me my entire life growing up that my mom was the reason for all of his problems, and that she was an overall horrible person. I believed him and looked up to him a lot. I'm not sure how, but I finally started realizing that he was full of it. I really dislike him for how much he manipulated me when I was young. He knew that I admired him a ton, and he ate it up and absolutely used it to his advantage. He still bashes my mom all the time, saying things like, "I haven't gotten sleep since your mom and I divorced," as well as claiming that he was always in shape, that is until mom left, and even telling me he has dreams about them being back together, like a lot, and it's extremely weird. He's also always been far too interested in my body, noting to me how I've developed into an adult and other highly inappropriate things. My father is not a good person, and he is by all definitions a creep, as well as extremely close-minded based on people's race and gender. He has mostly been single, with a few girlfriends here and there, and based on the way he acts, it's pretty clear why. I stopped staying with my dad at all when I turned 18 years old. He threw constant fits about me not wanting to stay with him at his disgusting house, where I would have to clean up after him and use dish soap just to try and wash my hair. One day, I told him he was just going to have to grow up and get over it. I now live with my mom. I don't like carrying a million things back and forth because I never had anything I needed at my dad's. He left me about 50 text messages and 20 calls that day, all of which I ignored. This wasn't the first time he had done this either. He's been obsessed with me for a long time, treating me like his wife and making his problems my problems since I was very young. I've always felt like I've had to take care of him. Now that I've moved out and gotten married, it's hardly changed. He keeps track of how long it's been since we've seen each other. He would say stuff like, "You know it's been 2 months since I've seen you, right? When you move back here, I will see you a lot more." It's also constant calls, wanting to talk about nothing for hours. Like I've said, he treats me like I'm his girlfriend or his wife. He's also the biggest drama queen I've ever met. He treats his life like he lives in a movie. It's just the way he thinks and talks. It's very hard to explain, but it makes him unbearable to be around. I don't know what to do about him. I don't want to talk to him or even be around him. My husband hates being around him. Everyone other than his family hates being around him also. He had a heart attack last year, and that's why I've kept up any relationship at all. He doesn't treat himself any better to prevent another one, so it's hard to feel sympathetic. I just know that he's due for another one anytime. In fact, I went on vacation just last week, and a few days before, my dad called saying he's been thinking about going to the ER because he's been having chest pains and having trouble breathing. He has been having these symptoms since around June of last year, and he decided a few days before our vacation that he had known about this for several months just to finally consider going to the doctor for it. He told me that he didn't want to worry me and he felt bad getting in the way of our vacation. In other words, he was expecting that if he went to the doctor, that we would not go on our vacation and visit him instead. He seriously expected us to cancel our non-refundable vacation that he's known about for a while. He never ended up going to the doctor, so the call was purely to be dramatic and worry me for the entirety of our vacation. What brought me onto this post is that my dad is having some kind of procedure done to figure out why he has trouble breathing, but I can tell you exactly why. It's because he doesn't eat healthy, he doesn't get regular exercise, and he is an alcoholic. He's been telling doctors he doesn't drink or eat bad. He wants me there at this non-life-threatening procedure an hour away from where I live. Allegedly, his much more adult sisters will be there too. He's making me the primary person the doctor asks on what to do with him despite me saying I didn't want to be. And I don't even think that's needed for this type of procedure. I'm tired of doing stuff just to please him, as well as doing stuff just so he won't throw a fit. I don't need to be at this procedure because I'm not his wife. He's just got this creepy attachment to me that I just simply hate. I don't want to be around him ever, and at this point, I simply don't know what to do. So your dad is absolutely awful. I mean, his behavior in this situation is not only disgusting and incredibly inappropriate, it's just downright manipulative. I mean, really look at the facts here. This guy does not need you there so that he can go to the doctor. He's clearly just playing you. He's guilt-tripping you and trying to drag you back into his life, despite the fact that you're married and you've moved on with your own life away from this man. I mean, let's look at the facts for a second. He gaslighted you as a child to convince you that your mom was a terrible person. He's been obsessed with you for years and basically doesn't want to let you go. And now he's using his health against you just to try and guilt trip you into doing what he wants. And that's not fair for you in the slightest. So honestly, I would not put up with this for a second. If I was in your shoes, I would set up some clear boundaries and explain to him that no, you do not want to be in his life and that you are not going to be involved in his medical procedures. Because think about it for a second. He has spent your entire life manipulating you, and he probably enjoyed the admiration that you showed towards him all throughout your childhood. And he is now probably desperately trying to claw that back into his life by using his health against you. And truly, you do not deserve this kind of behavior. You haven't done anything wrong, and you deserve peace and freedom from this absolute narcissist. So hopefully you're able to set some kind of boundaries, or if anything, just drop him off completely, because this man is clearly manipulative, and he is not a kind person, and he seriously, in my opinion, does not have your best interest in mind. My crazy entitled mother makes a false police report just to try and get me in trouble, but it all backfired really quickly as the cops showed up to her house ready to confront her about her terrible actions. Here's what happened. So this literally just happened. It's 9:41 in the morning here on the East Coast on a Sunday morning, and I was woken up at 5:58 a.m. this morning by 6 police officers at my door. I heard my doorbell ring and immediately panicked. I was afraid they were coming to tell me something bad had taken place, but apparently my mom called the police department and told them my house was on fire. Now, for some backstory, I walked out on my mom and grandma about 6 months ago. I spent my teenage years being my grandma's caretaker, dropping out of school, and even dealt with them using my social security number to acquire things on credit that they never paid for. I finally got most of that fixed, but not without angering them. My mom looked at it like I was ruining my grandma's reputation. When I walked out, it left my grandma's children, 3 sons and my mom, to finally take care of her, and they all went ballistic on me because apparently it was my responsibility. They started calling my job, having wellness checks done, and trying to get my husband arrested. This morning when I opened the door, an officer was standing there and said to me that they had gotten a very quick and abrupt 911 call stating there was a fire at my address. I told him I had just woken up and that nothing was wrong. I had my phone on hand and I showed him that I hadn't called anyone today. He then read off a number to me and asked who that might be, and I immediately knew who it was. I explained the situation to them and the officers got angry as there were 6 of them in total. The officer asked why my family was doing this and I told him. He said he was going to check into it and would call me back. He called back at around 8:30 in the morning. He said he'd made contact with my mom and grandma and they immediately got defensive. He says he's going to see about pressing charges against them for abuse of emergency services, and that when he told them this, they started blaming me, trying to deflect back to me somehow. Apparently, my grandma even asked if the officer thought it was right I wasn't helping her. The officer told her I wasn't adult with a right to my own life, and that they couldn't impede on that right in any way, shape, or form. Apparently, my grandma mentioned her nephew who works as a prosecutor for the state and said that she would be calling him about this. The officer told her to go ahead, that his body camera had recorded everything, and then grandma got upset about being recorded. I told this officer that they've done everything they can to intimidate me just to try and get me to return home. And he said he told them that harassing someone because they won't do what they ask is also a crime. Now, my grandma doesn't like it when people tell her she isn't above the law. And now I've gotten a shield order issued, meaning that law enforcement won't come to my house unless I call them. The officer also said that he'd be in touch with the magistrate about my husband filing charges against these two for trying to get him arrested under false pretenses and slander because they put lies on social media about him. Guys, I'm just done with this. I have lived the last 6 months of my life in fear, waiting for the police to come at night. It's a small town, so thankfully this morning, the officer is a new recruit and young, as the older officers have been more sympathetic towards my grandma. This is all so messy, and I honestly don't know what to do. Your grandma and extended family are absolutely crazy. There are so many red flags in this story, it really just keeps piling on top of the other. For one, the fact that you're a teenager and you had to drop out of school just to take care of your grandma is seriously twisted. I mean, they even use your social security number just to get things on credit that they never paid for. Like, that is a crazy level of fraud, and there's no excuse for that. Also, your aunts and uncles absolutely should be stepping up to take care of your grandma. That should not be your responsibility. You are quite literally just the grandkid in this situation, and your grandma's children absolutely need to step up and get things done. There's no good reason for you to put your life on hold just so your aunts and uncles can run around and basically do whatever they want. But you know what? Despite all the crazy things that they put you and your husband through, the police finally caught up with them, and they messed up big time. Making a false police report like that is going to land them in some serious hot water. Not to mention the fact that the police officer had that all on recording, and if things escalate from here, you can bet he's going to be using that in the court of law against these weirdos. So if anything, let that be a silver lining. These people have finally been caught in the act of treating you like garbage, as well as trying to ruin your life. So if anything, I'm really happy for you guys, because this might be the beginning of the end of their weird antics. So hopefully there's a way out of this weird situation, and you're able to get away from these creepy family members who are actively trying to ruin your life, because they just crossed a line that they won't soon be able to cross back from. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius? Check it out, link down below in the description. My wife gave me an ultimatum that if we want to have a child together, then I need to stop working at my office and start working from home. And I'm not sure how to proceed, and I really don't know what to do. So my wife and I have been married for 5 years, and we dated 3 years prior. So in total, we've been together for about 8 years. We have no children yet, but have often discussed having one. We bought a house 2 years ago while we still both worked remotely, as we needed space, and honestly, it was time to own a property. Last year, I changed jobs and ended up working at a big tech company. My job pays well, but I'm required to come to the office 2 or 3 days every week. And this is a big shift from the fully remote work that I was doing. This has caused many arguments between us, as my wife says that she's unfairly stuck with certain chores, and these are things that we would both normally be doing, like groceries or laundry or general cleaning throughout the week. And if I worked from home, I would still be doing these things and helping out. We both make roughly about the same income, though her field is completely different from mine, and she is 100% remote. Other arguments have come up because she doesn't like how friendly one of my female coworkers is. She overheard a conversation with my friend, who also works at my company, and he said that she's pretty stunning, considering the other women in this field. And ever since she heard that, she has been paranoid ever since. She will casually ask me about my day when I'm in the office, and has gotten annoyed if I mention the pretty coworker. So I've stopped doing that and generally just hang out with the other guys on the team. She got really upset recently because during one of her work from home days, I had my Teams up, and she saw the female coworker send over a heart emoji in association with some of my comments in the chat about work. She started questioning why the thumbs up emoji wasn't sufficient enough. All this backstory is to say that last night we were talking about our 5-year plan and where a baby would fit into it. She asked me if I planned to stay at my job or if I was looking at a different company altogether. I told her I didn't know. It pays really well and the team is pretty laid back, but I obviously don't enjoy being in the office, nor do I find it necessary for my field. She was sort of guiding the conversation for me to say I'd leave my job in the next year or two. I kept saying I really didn't know, and she then said, well, honestly, I don't see us having a baby with me just stuck at home all by myself all day with it. If we're going to do this, I want you to be working remotely as well. Then the responsibility is more equally shared. So basically, she gave me an ultimatum that if I want a baby with her, I need to find a fully remote job again. It's not an issue to do so. My field is littered with these kinds of jobs, but I feel that her motives aren't completely pure. I asked her if it was really about sharing the baby responsibilities or if it was about me being at work with other women. She admitted that it would be even more annoying to her if she was stuck at home all day with a baby while I was getting all this attention from some single attention-seeking homewrecker instead of being a father. She said that she's tired of mother being a woman's identity forever after having a baby, but men aren't always seen as fathers and can do whatever we want. I am processing this, but I need some outside perspective. I really want a child, and I definitely want it with her, but I am worried about having to find a new job and what that means for us as a couple. If it's partly because of her insecurity over a pretty coworker, I'm not sure what to do or how to proceed. She seemed pretty adamant that if we are having a baby, we both need to work remotely. What should I do? This is kind of weird because it sounds like your wife is letting her insecurities about you and your coworkers dictate your future for the next 5 years. Like, that just doesn't add up in my opinion. It would be different if there was some kind of history here where you were unfaithful with your wife, so she has like legitimate reason to be concerned that you might do it again, but it doesn't sound like you're doing that. It sounds like you're a functioning adult who has a job and your wife is being unnecessarily paranoid about a pretty coworker. Like, that lady could very easily quit tomorrow, like you never know. Or you could even start working in a different sector of your job. Like, there's a lot of things that could happen. So for her to basically make a plan of like, okay, you're gonna quit your job and work remotely, all because I don't like this lady that you work with, is, in my opinion, a massive overreaction. And I'm also really confused why the chores aren't already split up equally. Like, sure, some chores are easier to do when you're at home and you work from home, but there's no reason why you can't like have a schedule and figure that out all together. Like, the original poster even implied that you both work the same amount of hours and you earn the same money. So sharing these responsibilities, I really don't think is that big of a deal. And especially when it comes to the baby, I think you just need to explain to her that you're going to step up to the plate and be the father that she needs you to be when you are working from home. Like, obviously that's going to be a completely different dynamic from house chores, and I can completely understand where she's coming from. So hopefully this all works out for you, and hopefully you don't have to quit your job just to work from home. I really don't think that would be fair for you in the slightest, and I think there has to be some kind of middle ground that both of you can come to and try and agree on. My entitled professor makes me sign a weird contract for the class I'm taking, but I get malicious, and I find a workaround where I don't have to take the final, but still get a good grade in her class. And I've honestly never been more satisfied in my life. So last semester, I had to take a class from a professor who wasn't bad as being incompetent, but definitely was one of those professors where they tried some new way of teaching that they really needed to develop, and you just happened to be caught in their crossfire. She also gave the vaguest instructions on what she did want in her turned-in work and didn't believe in study guides, as she wanted to encourage reading the material. Honestly, I got more out of the book than her class, and buying the book alone would have been far cheaper. Trying to get direction out of this lady was worse than trying to pull teeth, and was mostly met with her just saying for us to do our best. On top of this, she apparently handed out a grading contract on the first day, giving this out to everyone and making us sign it and return it. I missed this due to being sick, so I didn't get it until later. The said contract basically boiled down to indicating what grade you wanted at the start of the semester. You either met the conditions for that grade or you would fail. So basically, by saying you wanted an A, you either met the qualifications for an A or you would fail, even if you would have gotten a B or a C instead. If you decided to play it safe with saying that you wanted a C, even if you excelled and would normally get a B or an A, you would instead get that C. So to cut out a lot of the drama of the semester, two things really need to be covered first. The first one being that I had surgery at the beginning of the semester, and the second is that I was working full-time while at school to pay for said school. Both ended up with me missing a lot of work, and normally I would just cut my losses, except I'm very close to my degree, and my professor said I could make up the work. Otherwise, I would fail and need to retake the class anyway in the spring. So I decided that I had nothing to lose, and I buckled down with basically getting next to no sleep for weeks. I had about a month and a half worth of work that needed to be completed within about 2 weeks. Now finally, this is where my malicious compliance comes in. During an exchange where I was emailing my work, she told me I still hadn't done her contract, which at that point, only a few weeks out from finals, I didn't get the point. But she told me either I did the contract or I would fail. She also had let slip that not doing the final would drop you a letter grade, but not fail you. The only exception to her weird contract that wasn't in it, and one I confirmed very deliberately in writing. At this point, I was bone tired, and honestly, I was forcing myself to continue working on anything, which may not sound like much, but with my mental health history, this was a Herculean effort. I just wanted the pain to stop, and I just wanted to get a full night's rest. So I decided if not doing the final just dropped me by a letter grade, then I would just do the work for a B and end up with a grade I thought was fair for how the semester had gone. This meant for even more work, but it also meant I didn't need to worry about a final and could finally just sleep, which I explained as much to the professor when she asked me why I didn't have a final turned in on the last day of school. And that so far has been the last I ever spoke to or have ever seen this lady. Imagine my surprise when I actually ended up with a B in her class. Personally, I take this to be her never wanting me in her class again, and I'm not sure if this makes me a jerk overall, but I do know she apparently has it now that not doing the final is an automatic D, so sorry to anyone who came after me, but I clearly got away with something that she didn't like. That teacher sounds super obnoxious. The fact that she makes you sign some kind of arbitrary contract just to try and lock you into a grade that you may or may not get is really toxic, and that is such an awful way to run a class. Like, why would you punish people for doing better or worse? Why not just give them the grade that they earned? So I honestly don't blame the original poster for being like, you know what, I'm not showing up for the final. Why should I? Just give me the letter grade deduction and let me be on my way. So good for you for getting away with something that probably really annoyed her, because this professor sounds awful, and she clearly has no idea what she's doing. My wife's life is slowly being ruined by a toxic friend from her past, and I seriously don't know what to do. So my wife and I have been together for 1 year. She recently told me that I have been bossing her around, talking down to her, and exploding over small things. I have noticed that I have been irritable, but I hadn't realized that my behavior towards her had changed. She basically told me to get my stuff together or she would leave. I apologized and said I would stop acting this way. The problem is I haven't, and in the moment, I don't even realize I'm doing it. I'm struggling to understand my behavior since I've never treated her this way before ever. Sure, I've been irritable and overreacted to small confrontations during really stressful times, but it's usually pretty obvious that's what's going on, and I can see it as it happens. But this time is different. Simply getting my stuff together isn't working, and I feel I need to understand where this is coming from in order to resolve it. Having gone through recent events, the only thing I can think of that coincides with the change in behavior is that she recently let a toxic friend back into her life. The friend in question is one that she's known all her life, since they were in kindergarten. The friend has a history of belittling my wife and generally acting very toxic towards her. She has done a number on her self-esteem throughout her life and was the direct cause of many mental health issues that my wife experienced when she was younger. Last year, they cut contact when the friend told my wife that her problems made the friend feel sick and that her messages were pathetic and disgusting. She told her that she'd never lead a normal life and that I was only with her out of pity. Needless to say, this led to a massive fight and subsequently to no contact between them. In the following months, my wife was struggling with the loss of this friend and on numerous occasions wanted to call her to apologize. I supported her in this time and helped to push through the grief, eventually to a point where she was happy that the last toxic person was out of her life. Since then, she has made massive improvements on her well-being. She's gained a lot of weight, having been severely underweight due to an eating disorder. She quit smoking and was told by her family, friends, schoolmates, and myself that she had brightened up so much that she looked like a completely different person. Her family especially have been ecstatic to see the improvement in her, given all the hard times that they have seen her endure. Anyway, my wife recently got a new phone and had forgotten to block said friend on it. It had simply been out of her mind for so long. The friend then texted her shortly after New Year's. She says that she regrets how it ended between them and that she wants to be a part of her life again. Immediately, my wife starts having anxiety over this. She didn't answer this friend, but she couldn't focus on her studies, and she eventually starts smoking again and has nightmares daily until she finally responds. In order to somehow end the misery, it leads to a phone call between them where the friend says that my wife can't just cut her out when they've known each other for so long. When my wife tells her how the friend's behavior has affected her, she proceeds to put the entire blame on my wife and says that if she has a problem with anything the friend does, then she should have said something in the moment. She can't be held responsible if she's not told that her behavior is unacceptable. This line of reasoning seems absolutely insane to me, given the fact that the things she says are objectively cruel. No one would need to be told that telling people they're disgusting and won't ever have a normal relationship is messed up. But my wife's take on it was that the friend was right, and that it was all her own fault because she didn't stand up to the friend in the moment. And when she said this, I was livid. I must admit that I reacted pretty poorly in this situation. I've never met the friend in person, but I hate her with a fury, and I didn't hold back telling my wife what I felt about the friend. Eventually, we calmed down and agreed that my wife should talk with more people than just me about continuing the relationship with this person. Now, everyone, and I mean literally everyone that she talked to, said that she should ghost her and block her immediately. Her mother, her sisters, her friends, counselors, everyone told her that this person was bad for her and that she should not pursue it. My wife even admitted to herself, and I thought that this would finally be the end of it, but it turns out it wasn't. Instead, it turns out that she had started lying and was talking to the friend in secret. Eventually, I found out, and she made me promise not to tell her family. She also accused me of being controlling and that I had no say in who she chooses to talk to. I do agree with the fact that you can't control other people's relationships, and I apologized and said that, of course, she knows what's best for her, and if this is her mistake to make, she's allowed to make it. What has been nagging me since then is that she regularly gives little updates on how much the friend has changed and how sweet she is now. But a few days later, it always turns out that the things she's praising the friend for didn't actually happen that way, and what was actually said was in reality very different and significantly more judgmental and negative. It's weird because when she admits that the friend was actually being toxic again, it's like she knows, but then forgets again the day after, explaining it away as if she probably just misunderstood what was happening. In my view, the friend is just playing nice, while slowly reintroducing the old patterns, and my wife is in complete denial about it. This is around the time when I started acting on her again. In some of the arguments, I've called her pathetic for starting smoking again. In her words, apparently I would boss her around like she can't think for herself. I've stopped spending time with her, and I'm constantly busy with other stuff. During one of the times when it turned out the sweet things the friend said was actually really judgmental and dismissive, I remember thinking that she was weak, and I felt contempt. I think it's wrong of me to feel that way, but even though I consciously agree that it's her mistake to make, and that I can't and shouldn't even try to force her actions, I can't help to feel that she's less than what she used to be. I don't understand her reasoning for continuing a relationship with this person after everything she's done, as well as with all the proof that she clearly hasn't changed. Now, I'm lying to her family about the two of them talking, and I don't feel good about that either. It's like I'm enabling her in some kind of way. I want to be compassionate and understanding, but on the inside, I'm fuming. She doesn't deserve to be treated badly by me for this, but I don't know what I can do to get past these feelings. Maybe I'm being selfish and irrational, but I can't talk to her family about it, and I can't say anything to my friends or family either, not without revealing too much about her personal history. I don't know how to get out of this cycle. What should I do? I think this is such a terrible situation to be stuck in. Like, clearly she is absolutely in denial, and it really is disturbing that she just can't see truth in this situation. This friend is clearly treating her like garbage, and they are absolutely trying to drag your wife back into an awful situation and an awful friendship. And this can hardly even be called a friendship, to be completely honest with you. No friend would say the things that this person has said to your wife. I mean, it really is disturbing. So hopefully you can have some kind of conversation with her and try to have some kind of intervention in general, maybe even getting a therapist involved. Because unfortunately, as you already know, you can't control what she does, and you can't control the people that she spends time around. And hopefully you or somebody else is able to break through to her and help her see that this friend is definitely not good for her. My entitled family tried to force me to move out of my house so my entitled older brother can move into it, claiming that I don't need this much space to begin with and that I would be better off living in the camper outside. Here's what happened. So I'm a single man in my early 30s. I've got a brother who's 29 and he's already got 4 kids now. He had his first at 22 and the second followed a year later, then the third 2 years after that, and the fourth is most recently born a couple of months ago. His wife and I do not get along, as she always likes to try and get a rise out of me by acting superior, then turns into an extremely self-victimizing drama queen if I retaliated against her in any way. She can cry in an instant and can put on an extremely convincing show to get sympathy from just about anyone. My parents and brother absolutely absolutely adore her, even though they know exactly how she really is and just don't really care. She's very good looking, I'll give her that, but she's so awful that I could never be attracted to her. She also refuses to get any sort of job, even though she has a college degree, and my mother willingly helps with the kids all day, so their finances are entirely dependent on my brother. This also means they can't afford to live anywhere but my parents' house, and privacy is a bit of an issue with all of them under one roof in a 3-bedroom house that was built in the 60s. Growing up, my younger brother was also the obvious favorite. We are 3 years apart in age, but he developed a superiority complex because I was badly punished if I retaliated against his antics in any way back then. It was obvious my parents cared for him a lot more because he got the lion's share of everything, unless people called them out on it, which did happen a fair bit by my other family members, which is why my parents packed us all up and moved us about 150 miles away from them, so they generally would only see us on holidays, since it was a 3-hour drive. My brother got awful towards me physically on a number of occasions, flirted relentlessly with my first girlfriend to the point where she broke up with me and laughed at any misfortune that I had, and my parents just told me to suck it up whenever I was upset about it. I only got equal treatment when my parents wanted to keep up appearances. I admit it was rather funny to see the looks on their faces whenever they had to treat me equal to my brother on birthdays and Christmas, because other people were present. We had relatives that were very nosy and loved gossiping drama, so my parents did their best to hide what was really going on and threatened to take all my stuff away if I didn't keep my mouth shut. If anything, it just made my parents celebrate more when I turned 18 and moved out, because it meant they no longer had to provide for me. I wasn't even done with high school yet when I moved out, but honestly, couch surfing was far better than living with them. I was low contact ever since leaving home. They didn't even show up for my high school graduation, but I really didn't care. From that point on, I would usually only see my parents and brothers on holidays, just like the rest of the family. The start of the 2020 pandemic was not kind to me. I lost my job and couldn't renew the lease on my then condo because my roommate also lost his job and neither of us could afford the place on unemployment money. It was a rented 2-bedroom condo that I really loved. As the lease was ending, my roommate left early to move back in with relatives, and I had to sell nearly all my stuff because I was soon going to be homeless if I didn't downsize to an extreme. I really shouldn't have rented a place that was so expensive, but I liked living the high life until that life wasn't kind to me, and I realized I should have been living somewhere much cheaper so I could have saved more money to fall back on. But I had a plan. I own a truck simply for the fact that I've always loved trucks, so I found a $1,000 camper in good shape and put it on my truck just so I could live out of it for a while. It was supposed to be temporary, but I ended up living out of it far longer than I ever thought. I originally was hoping to be able to live out of the camper at my parents' house, where my brother and his family still reside as well. But when I asked my parents to let me stay for a while, they told me they had a full house and didn't want me there. Plus, we hadn't exactly gotten along in the past decade. They said they'd only agree to let me park my camper there if I paid them basically what it would cost to rent an apartment in my area. That was way too much just to park a camper. I was jobless and trying to save as much of my unemployment money as I could until I could find a new job. I may as well be living in an apartment with that rent price that they were asking. My parents called my camper an eyesore and told me to take a hike since we couldn't come to an agreement. And my sister-in-law thought it was absolutely hilarious that I had to live in a camper. My brother joined her in pointing at it and mocking me while calling me a homeless bum. I parked my truck and camper in a store parking lot to sleep on the first night that I had nowhere else to go. I felt scared out of my mind that someone might try to break in. Suffice to say, I didn't sleep well that night. There was nowhere else I could go, as any other relatives that owned houses were fairly far away, and all my friends were apartment people. I was pretty attached to my area as well, so I didn't want to just leave. I'd also had my mail forwarded to my friend's apartment. It was the only way that I could still get my mail anymore. Finding a stable place to park was pretty difficult. I went looking around to try and find a job similar to my old one. It took months of living the nomadic camper life. In that time, I had to deal with a lot. Everything from beggars to people who were addicted to substances to people demanding that I leave because my camper was an eyesore. At one point, someone who told me to move claimed to be with an HOA. I wasn't even parked on a street with houses, and when I questioned them, what HOA are you talking about, they got incredibly belligerent and threatened me. I moved my camper anyway just to avoid the trouble. In order to have a steady supply of electricity, I learned to use a long extension cord to plug in anywhere I could recharge my camper batteries. This meant sneaking around, plugging it into an outside outside outlet of a random building while parked on a street. I know that's a crummy thing to do, but I had to keep my batteries charged so my refrigerator would stay cool. I had a small solar power bank for recharging my phone, but I didn't have anything like a generator, and generators are noisy and require fuel anyways, so I did what I had to do. After months of living like that, I finally managed to get a new job. I had to move to the neighboring city to find a job that didn't involve retail. I worked retail while in college and promised myself never again, though I was nearly ready to break that promise. I was still getting unemployment money, but I had no stable place to live while receiving it, and I didn't want to still be jobless when it ran out. Plus, I was bored out of my mind. I had little else to do but read, watch movies on a small portable DVD player, use my phone or laptop, and keep note of where I could park and what local bathrooms I could use. I kind of envy that the Japanese have public bathhouses. We could really use stuff like that over here. When I finally landed a new job, I practically lived in the back lot of the building by the warehouse, in old employee parking spaces. Literally no one else seemed to bother using because they were so far in the back that the area was borderline forgotten. My boss and company owner actually liked this arrangement because I was willingly available to take any shift I could get, so long as I had enough sleep. He even let me take the camper off my truck and set it up in one of the spaces so I could drive around without it. Not exactly sure if this was legal, but no one bothered us about it. The entire time that I lived back there, I didn't have to deal with many trespassers. There were a few, but the security guards escorted them out. I was pretty much on call almost all the time when they needed me, and was working virtually every day of the week. My boss let me plug the camper into the building for power and water, and I paid a small amount of rent by working for free on Sundays when no one else was in the office but the janitor and security guard. Beyond that, I usually had a shower at a friend's apartment or at my local gym, as the camper didn't have a shower in it and only had a portable toilet, and I didn't want to fill it because emptying it was a nasty chore, so I used other bathrooms as often as I could. I had a key to the warehouse and could go in to use the bathroom there at any hour. I was even on a first-name basis with a night security guard. He's since become one of my closest friends. The camper was easy to heat in the winter with a small electric heater. Summers were not fun though. The camper didn't have AC, so I had to get a used portable AC unit just to try and make it bearable. I made a lot of overtime pay and hands-on learned some new skills from other employees. Eventually, midway into this year, I landed a better position in the company as a supervisor and started making a better salary than my old job. And that's when I decided I wanted a house. The scare I'd gotten from losing my condo made me realize I needed something much more stable for the long term. I looked around for something close to my work, and just 2 miles away found a 3-bedroom manufactured home on a small property, but I managed to get it for $10,000 less than the asking price somehow. I used nearly my entire savings for a down payment and got approved for a home loan. I finally didn't have to live in a camper anymore. There was enough space for me to back my truck in behind the house to take the camper off to set it up in the backyard, so I put it there as its own building just in case I want to use it again. When I was fully settled in the house, I was dumb enough to brag about it on my book of faces, if you know what I mean. My family saw the post, and that's where things went absolutely horrible. After a few weeks, my parents and brother, along with his family, came to visit completely unannounced to have a tour of my home. I didn't even give them the address, so how they found where I live, I still don't know. None of my friends have fessed up, and no prior family members visited me before that, so I wonder if they stalked me at work and followed me home or something. It really would not surprise me. Once I opened the door, they practically all shoved their way in like a bunch of rambunctious tourists, then just started making themselves at home. They all kept poking around, and my sister-in-law had this creepy smirk that she kept sending my way, and it was only later that I figured out why, and it made me madder than a bull on steroids that just got stung by a hornet. My parents were constantly talking about how I've got so much extra space now, and it's too much for someone like me who has no wife or kids. And okay, I don't have one now, but maybe someday. And my brother kept remarking about how there was more space than our parents' house, and my house was closer to his job too. It was red flags all around, I know. Eventually, my brother asked me to speak privately. Everyone else suddenly left the room and piled onto the front porch. That's what finally made me realize they planned something. My brother, let's call him Dan for the sake of simplicity, said the house was too much for me alone, and I should let him move in with his family because his wife is pregnant with kid number 4, and my house is much closer to his job. He pointed out that I already have the camper, so I could just live in the outside while they live in the main house. And I'd like to point out that Dan never once spoke of offering rent. Mind you, he he's got a good job. He also started talking about how there would be changes and even curfews, and that I couldn't just walk in at any time without prior notice. If it weren't my brother, I'd think that the person I was talking to had lost their mind. But Dan lost his marbles long ago, thanks to our parents treating him like he was the center of the world. I tried to speak, but he kept talking over me, as if I had no say in the matter. There was no way on earth I'd rent my house, or parts of my house to him. Other people maybe, just so I can pay the mortgage off more easily, but certainly not him or his nasty wife. I've heard of this exact same kind of situation in videos online many times, and never once did I think I'd actually live it, because I thought it was so ludicrous. But my parents, brother, and sister-in-law do all fit the bill for a bunch of narcissists who are clearly entitled and kinda crazy. So I picked up my phone and set it to start recording, and then I just held on to it. Dan didn't even seem to care or notice that I'd done this, and just sat there with his arms waving around while talking about all the reasons of why he needed my house. Then went from saying that to acting like it was a done deal and trying to reach out his hand to shake mine. And it was right then that I finally decided to show my backbone, and I told him absolutely not. And I said it loud enough that Dan stumbled backward for a second. I'd rarely ever raised my voice to him on that level, because I was punished by my parents if I ever did that. But this was my house, not theirs. My spine can be as shiny as it wants here. I stood up and then told him that my house was not up for grabs, and acting like I'll let him move in just because they want it won't make it happen. I bought my house for me, and it's not my fault he keeps having more kids and has to keep living with our parents because he can't afford to move out. Dan got as physically close to me as he could without actually touching me, and said that I didn't deserve the home and he needed a better place for his family to live. I laughed back in his face and said that's total BS, because I worked hard to be able to buy my house. Of course I deserved it. Dan started yelling that I have no wife or kids and I don't need all the space, so I may as well just give it to him. I said I'm not giving him anything, and he never even offered to pay me rent. If I let him move in, I'd still be covering the entire mortgage on my own house without even being able to live in my own house. Then Dan told me that he shouldn't have to pay rent because his family comes first, and our parents said I was going to do this and that I will. And that's when I yelled at him and said, as if their word was law or something, and told Dan that they did not have the right or power to give my house to him. Then, right on cue, my parents and sister-in-law barged back in through the front door and surrounded me to try and force me to agree. There was a lot of fighting, but to sum it up, from this point on, I heard the line "just do it for Dan" way more times than I can remember. In the fight, I told them they all don't have a say in my life or my house, and then I told them to get out before I call the cops. My sister-in-law screamed at me the loudest about how she was pregnant again and I can't do this to her. I said I did nothing to her. She just assumed that she could take and take from me like I would just allow it. I had no obligations to her or her family. I then called her a stuck-up brat who never had any respect for me, so I don't care what she thinks or how many kids she has. I have no sympathy for her. She won't be living in my house. Well, that made her angry enough to try and attack me, so there was a shuffle back and forth, but the phone I was holding recorded pretty much everything, so I held it up and said I was going to call the police if they didn't leave right away. My parents told Dan that they were leaving. Then my mother said I had a week to come to my senses. I told her I won't be and to not come back. Then I told my sister-in-law that my phone recorded everything, and if she tries anything, I will press charges for assault. She screamed at me and then stormed out loudly, crying with her face in her hands. My mother was the last one out the door and said that I better do this for Dan and my sister-in-law, but I responded by saying that I won't be doing any sort of thing anytime soon. What an absolute roller coaster. The original poster has been through so much. They went from living in a camper for a while to then saving up all this money just to try and buy their own place, and now their entitled family is jumping all over them again, basically trying to kick this guy out and force him to live back in that camper again. And that is so unbelievably toxic and so not fair. He worked so hard for this. He went through so many trials and tribulations. He absolutely earned this house. So it's absolutely backwards that they would try and kick him out of it. I mean, how entitled do you have to be to not only show up to somebody's house, but try and coerce them into getting out of that house? And this is after they treated him so poorly and forced him to move his camper off their property. So good for the original poster for standing up for themselves, because this type of behavior is so inappropriate, and this guy will honestly be so much better off without dealing with these people in his life. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. An entitled Karen claims that I'm I'm faking my illness, claiming that I stole the medicine I used to manage my pain and that I'm some kind of corrupt liar just looking for attention. But when she said that, I wasn't going to take that sitting down. So I marched right back over to her and I put her in her place. Here's what happened. So this happened about 4 or 5 years ago. For some context, I was about 18 years old at the time, and I was diagnosed with osteoarthritis in my left knee. It's a degenerative form of arthritis, and my case was severe. It was a constant thing, and I would be in excruciating pain and taking painkillers to make it a little less painful. My doctor, a few weeks prior, instructed me to stay off my leg and use crutches, wear a knee brace, and also prescribed me a heavy painkiller medication. Well, one day I was on my way home from another checkup, and it was around lunchtime. I had to take the medicine every 24 hours with a meal, so I stopped by Burger King to eat and then take my medication before my pain would return. A clerk carried my tray to the table and got my drink for me. I sit down and place my medication bottle on the tray so I don't forget to take it. So as I'm eating, across the room is the entitled Karen and her kid of the story. As I'm eating, she gives me a death stare, and I'm not sure why, but I choose to just ignore her. So I'm eating my food, and then I took my medication after I finished. I get up to take my tray to the trash, which is right behind her. The clerk was taking an order and couldn't help me with my stuff, so I put both my crutches under one of my arms and carried my trash over to the trash can. I get over there and I dump it, and as I'm trying to figure out how to carry my drink out, the entitled Karen speaks up to me in a semi-sarcastic tone. She says to me, "What's wrong with you?" Now, at this point, I'm used to being asked this, so I answered calmly and said, "I have severe osteoarthritis, and it's very painful and hard to walk." This entitled Karen then said something I absolutely never expected, and I was completely blown away when she said something so vile as this. She actually looked at me and said, "I bet you're faking." I looked at her confused and I said, "Excuse me?" She then said, "You're probably doing this for attention. I bet you those pills aren't even yours. I know all you college kids are just addicts. You are a terrible influence for the younger generation." At this point, she was obviously referring to her young son, who looked completely embarrassed. I didn't go to college, but I think she was basically saying that as another way of saying young adult. I was flabbergasted by what she just said. I suffer through severe pain and struggle to do even simple tasks. She literally does not know what she's talking about. I look at her and I say, "Ma'am, what do I have to gain from doing all this? I suffer from severe pain and it makes me feel useless, as well as a burden to everyone. I wish I didn't have to do this, but I do." This entitled Karen then says, "Yeah, right, you liar. You're just an addict and stole those pills, and you're just faking all of this so you don't get caught." At this point, I was upset, so I grabbed my ID and my pill bottle and I slammed it on the table in front of her. I looked at her and I said, "Read it and weep." She took a minute to read the pill bottle and my ID and looked at me to compare my face to the picture, and her face went pale when she realized that she was wrong. She looked at me and said, "I'm so sorry. I apologize." I responded by saying, "I know a lot of people my age are like that, but don't just make assumptions based on stereotypes. You're basically telling your kid it's all right to judge others based on their stereotypes. Now have a good day." And after I said that, she didn't say another word, but instead she just looked down absolutely defeated. A clerk ran over to help me carry out my drink and hold the door. As we walked out, he asked what happened, so I told him everything, with them eventually helping me into my car. He then says for me to wait a minute. He runs inside and returns with a gift card for $10 as some kind of apology, and that he is going to go talk to this lady. I thanked him for all that he did, and then I left. So hopefully I never have to deal with someone like that ever again. The entitled Karen in this story is seriously a massive jerk. Like, how could you possibly treat someone like that? She seriously looked at somebody in crutches who just so happened to be young at the time and say to them, "You know what? You're faking it." Like, what's wrong with you? Why would anybody in their right mind look at someone and make that kind of assumption? That is seriously so toxic and disgusting. And you know what? If I was in the original poster's shoes, I probably would have gone off a lot more than this person did. I mean, they were a lot nicer than I would have been if this lady said, "Oh, you're faking your injury." Like, no lady, I've got pills with my name on it. And just like the original poster, I would feel the same way. I gain nothing by faking my illness. Like, this doesn't help me in any way, and I really just don't like it. Why would I want this? So good for you for standing up for yourself. Because that entitled Karen was completely out of line. But even with her snarky remarks, you handled it like a pro. An entitled customer tries to purposefully break our bowling equipment just so he can get extra time to bowl longer with his family. But in the end, I get the last laugh as I charge this guy for all the free time he thought he was getting out of us. And as a result, he definitely was not not happy. Here's what happened. So I had the unique pleasure of working in customer service for over 7 years. My longest job was at a bowling alley in a mid-sized town. It was the high-end bowling alley in the town and thus attracted some pretty entitled people. While I got pretty good at zoning out their dumb requests and simply complying, there were a few times that malicious compliance really was warranted, and this was one of those times. So for some backstory, the bowling alley required people to purchase bowling by time, so typically it'd be like $20 per hour or something like that. When I turned on the lane, the bowlers got a 5-minute buffer period in addition to their time purchased. Most of the time, this was not an issue, and people came and left with no issue at all. Upon request, however, people could get an extra 15 minutes for free in case of mechanical issues or large groups that were in the 8th frame or higher, and I bet you can imagine where this goes bad. Now onto the main story. So one day, a family consisting of a dad, 2 daughters, and a mother came in and started a tab with 1 hour. We let them open tabs since we had servers and food service too. The kids were younger, but I had seen this dad in the bowling alley before, as he played in one of our leagues. He was one of those just snobby looking bowling guys with a rolling bowling bag, beat up bowling balls, and a huge belly that seemed to go hand in hand with the pro bowlers that came into this alley. He had scammed a lot of free stuff from us before, and we had actually been warned about him as employees. Fast forward an hour, and his time is almost up when all of a sudden I hear a large crash. It was the sound that a bowling ball makes when it hits the sweep that wipes the pins off the lane. There's a small window of time that a bowler can hit the sweep while it's clearing pins. And of course, the dad I discussed earlier was the one that hit it. He comes bumbling over and tells me the lane is broken. And I could clearly see that the lane was broken because the lane monitor screen had the code for a jammed arm. I apologized and I called for a mechanic. After doing that, he demanded 15 minutes of free time since he had to wait for the mechanic to fix the lane, which took about 2 minutes in general. Since it was his first incident, I gave it to him. And that honestly was my first mistake. Because as you can probably guess it, this happened again a second time, right as his time limit was getting low. He came bumbling over once again and did the same routine, and I regrettably gave the second set of time to him for free. And then he went away, and as you may have guessed it, it happened a third time. This time, however, I decided to charge him for the 15 minutes, since I knew what he was up to, and our policy specifically states that we only give 15 minutes for free. On the 4th time, the guy came over again, and I charged him again. This happens a total of 5 times, and I charged him for 3 of them. When he finally decided to pay out, he saw his bill and got furious with me. He came thundering over to me and barked at me, saying that I was wrong and that he needed to see my manager. When my manager came out, he gave his side of the story, which of course was about how I was an idiot and that our lanes break way too easily. I then gave my side and calmly explained that I gave him more free time than our policy had stated, and that due to his continued request for more time, I gave it to him at a cost. My manager then asked to see the tab and look through it. Not only did my manager agree that I was right, but he also made the guy pay for the second set of 15 minutes that I had originally given to him for free. My manager cited our policy and told the man what he needed to pay, and after some intense yelling, the guy cursed us out and vowed to never come back ever again. And wouldn't you believe it, he ended up coming back for league 3 days later. So clearly, he knew what he was doing that day, and he was just mad that he ended up getting caught. What an absolute scumbag, and honestly, this is so unacceptable. I mean, how can you treat someone like this and still get away with it? And when I first read through this, I was actually really surprised that this guy didn't get banned from this place. But the original poster actually has some more details involving that. They go on to explain that a few months later, he was eventually banned from the alley entirely. The guy apparently broke one of the super light balls of his that's about 6 pounds, and he got angry with the manager when they refused to fix it. And in his anger, he threw the ball at the glass doors and broke it. And because of that, he ended up getting arrested and was forced to pay for damages while also earning a restraining order. And that seriously is just not surprising to me. This sounds like one of those guys who's gonna try and work the system and then throw a temper tantrum when he doesn't get his way. So thankfully, there is some justice and karma in the world, because that guy was super obnoxious, and it only was a matter of time before he got banned from this bowling alley completely. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My entitled mom is in denial, claiming that I'm just gonna do my internship remotely, when in fact I am moving out, and I will be moving to the big city so I can pursue my career. But despite these facts, she still chooses not to get it, and I'm honestly so exhausted trying to explain anything nothing to her. Here's what happened. I'm going to be starting my internship in a few months, and it has been something IT related. I've told my mother about this, saying I'd be in the city looking for jobs because IT jobs are way more abundant in a city. When I first told her, she was a bit skeptical about it. She kept asking me if I'm sure I can't do my internship at home. I told her no, and I have to be working with computers for my internship because I'm there to get industrial experience. After the internship, I would probably stay in the city for more long-term IT jobs. But since then, every time the topic was brought up, she would always act like I'd be interning or working in my hometown instead. She would even prove this point by saying things that implied that I would be working from home instead of working in this city. And I would always correct her, saying it is near impossible to find an IT job in my small hometown away from the city. And just because someone else's daughter was able to find an accounting job there doesn't mean I'm gonna have the same opportunities with an IT job, let alone a decent one where I can get some industrial experience. Now, when I told her that, she responded by saying, yes, but as long as there's a computer, it's IT. And when she said that, I just did the biggest facepalm. She wants me to work in my previous office job in my hometown as a data entry clerk. The pay was decent, and I was able to give her some of my pay to help with groceries. But I suspect the real reason she liked it when I worked there is because the boss of the company is incredibly rich and gives out free stuff to women and elderly people during special holidays. As an employee of the company, I get to take home a lot of free goodies for my mother, which she was really happy about. I didn't really care about that stuff that much. I just needed the money to go to university. I also got the hint that she doesn't want me to quit that job when I wanted to switch jobs to do something I'm more passionate about. So I'm telling her that I'm not going to graduate with an IT degree and work in the same place before I went to university. I need to find IT jobs in the city. And she kept saying the same thing over and over again, as if she didn't understand what I just said. She just loves to reply with some kind of contrary statement, as if the point that I've just made meant nothing to her. Trying to tell her no was like talking to a broken record, and I just can't get through to her, so I just end up being quiet and letting her rant. And then she's shameless enough to try and ask me if I'm seriously going to be coming back to my hometown to work, and I just said at that point, whatever. I'm not going back to my hometown. Part of the reason why is because living with her drives me absolutely insane. I'm going to do my internship in the city anyways, but I'll be expecting an earful from her from time to time. She will be subtly complaining about the woes of city life and how convenient it would be for me if I were at home living with her, which honestly, I am absolutely not gonna do that. It sounds like your mom is in denial. She clearly does not understand that you are moving up and on with your life. You cannot be expected to live with her for the rest of your life just so she can get free goodies from the job you're currently working. And it sounds like you want to move on from that job anyways. And I don't blame you. You want bigger and better jobs for your future, and this data entry job just simply doesn't cut it for you, which makes sense considering your goals. So I would go for this internship no matter what your mom says. This is going to be such valuable experience, and it will be an opportunity for you to network with people that you very well could work with for the rest of your career. And if she seriously still does not get it, then maybe it's time for you to be more specific with her and set out right in front of her exactly what you're gonna do. Maybe something like, Mom, I refuse to work at the company I've been working at ever again. Even if you get me fired from every job I ever get, I will not return there. I'm not staying in this hometown, and I am going to the big city. And that's final, no matter what you say. Or maybe something along those lines, because from the sounds of it, your mom is simply not getting it. So hopefully this all goes well for you, because quite literally your whole life is in front of you. And I think you owe it to yourself to move out of your mom's house and move on with your life. My entitled cousin makes outrageous demands about a job that I'm trying to get her at my company. And when I tell her no, she freaks out on me and tries to get me disowned from the entire family. So as a result, I cut her as well as her mother out of my life. Here's what happened. I'm a 36-year-old female, and I've never been very good at keeping most people around. I basically disowned my physically and emotionally awful egg donor at the age of 10. I'm talking about my mother in case you're not catching on. And I did the same with my neglectful father at the age of 14. I have had symptoms of social anxiety disorder since I was about 3 or 4. I just don't really know how to connect with most people. My empathy levels are off the scale. However, this is especially prevalent when I do connect with someone or an animal or wildlife. I know now that some people find my kindness and sincerity to be off-putting. People have been so horrible to me, and I see so much horrible treatment throughout the world that I always give a compliment moment when one might pop up in my mind, and I work hard to be the queen of gift giving. It is understandable that this can scare some people, since I believe the only true monsters in this world are humans. There are, most likely, a lot of humans that have placated kindness and have been looking to manipulate or to do harm, but I am not like that. I go into overdrive trying to help the people I care about when they tell me they are in a bad situation, or if they just might be unhappy. A few years before COVID, during Thanksgiving, my cousin, who was in their mid-20s at the time, let's call her Tony, that's not her real name, was constantly complaining about how much she hated working as a caregiver. She would talk about how little money she made and how financially strapped she truly was. My family is mostly on the poverty scale. I think I only just barely broke out of that in the last 3 years. And while my husband and I are still not in the best financial situation in the world, it is a lot better than poverty. Anyways, I was working at a credit union at the time, and I offered to put my name down as her referral if she wanted to put her application in. The position was making over $4 more per hour than she was at her current position, and it came with a $500 signing bonus. I also took all honor roll and college credit English courses in high school, so my writing skills are superb. So I regularly offer to help my friends and loved ones with their resumes for free whenever they apply for a job. I offer the same to Tony, as we had discussed her applying to the credit union. I advised that I don't split referral bonuses, but that if she stayed long enough for me to get one, I would be happy to take her out for dinner. The referral bonus would have been $500, the same as the sign-on bonus. She seemed fine with it throughout dinner, and even seemed excited by the prospect of getting a different position. A few nights later, Tony texted me, asking if I would be willing to split a referral bonus with her. I advised her once again that I don't split referral bonuses, because we need the money too much. I also reiterated that I would be happy to take her to dinner if I got a referral bonus from her staying the required 90-day period. I had just started driving when I got her response, and I pulled over to read it, and I was flooded with absolute fury when I read her text that said, "You're just being selfish, just like your mother." Now, my entire family knows about me being mistreated as a child, and as much as I have tried Tony's whole lifetime to be a kind and good role model whenever I was around her, whenever she did not get the response that she was looking for from me, she would then go to use my hatred of my mother to try and hurt me by saying I am just like her and all these other horrible things. I told her then and there to lose my number because I will never be willing to help her with anything ever again. She texted me again, stating that she and her mother would be getting me banned from future Thanksgiving dinners all because of this. I reached out to my aunt, who is Tony's mother, and I told her that I loved her, but I needed to know if she was a part of this ordeal. She told me that she was, stating that I was selfish and claimed that I didn't know how to treat family and that I should just grow up. So I decided to stop letting her walk all over me and treat me like garbage every time her daughter has a temper tantrum. And so I burned down that bridge between us, as I told her that she can get lost. I went to work the next day and informed my boss that I would like my name removed as a referral for Tony, and that I did not want her application associated with me at all. My coworkers and management were astounded when they asked for the story. They stated that we specifically provide a $500 sign-on bonus so that new hires won't ask for the $500 referral bonus. Why does she need the bonus as well? Fast forward to next year at Thanksgiving, and my husband and I were fighting to get our car unstuck from the snow. Tony and her boyfriend came out onto my other aunt's porch and just laughed and mocked us the entire time. And my sister was upset when she found out. She said I absolutely should have interrupted her dinner to get her help. Neither my sister nor I speak to either this cousin or aunt anymore. Now, my grandma raised me since I was 14 years old, and my grandma warned me during high school that my aunt was not my friend and that I shouldn't fool myself, presumably because of all the horrible things she said about me behind my back to my grandma. I know my grandma was just trying to protect a broken child from even more harm, and I wish I had been smart enough to listen to her at the time. But yeah, I used to always wonder if anybody could ever love me, since the people who were supposed to love me the most obviously didn't. It took so very long for my husband to break through the persistent thought process of mine and teach me that I didn't have to continue to allow people like my aunt to treat me so badly because I didn't realize I don't deserve to be treated like garbage, especially by somebody who claims to be my family. I am amazingly lucky when it comes to the people I do have in my life. Quality over quantity, I guess. I am not very good at keeping most people around, and I have made plenty of mistakes in my life. But for this story, I stand completely by my behavior. My life is better and less stressful without toxic family members that constantly either treat me badly or make passive-aggressive remarks about how I have lived my life and have disowned my terrible parents. If you have a toxic family that makes you feel bad no matter how nice or good you are, try to remember that you are worthy of better and strive for a different environment. This life has continually showed me that if you are depressed and you wonder if the world would be better without you, trust me, cut the people whose words constantly hurt you, those who believe you are worthless, and change your environment. I know life is not always kind, and that may not always be an option, but definitely try. A content life is so much better than a life where you consistently want to end your existence because toxic people have convinced you that you are worthless. They are wrong. Be kind to that lifelong friend in the mirror. Look your friend in the eyes when you look in the mirror and say kind things in your mind. It has taken a long time, but I will attain self-love, and I recommend it for all. There's some good lessons to be learned there, but most importantly, if someone's treating you like garbage in this way, then seriously, you are not the bad person for cutting them off. I mean, the original poster here is obviously a very kind individual, and they were just trying to help out their cousin, who clearly was in some kind of need. And for them to act like that when they weren't given exactly what they want, even though what they wanted was absolutely ridiculous and not possible, is overall incredibly toxic. And the fact that they would then take this out on the very person who's trying to get them the job in the first place is just proof that they are not a good person in the slightest. And I don't blame the original poster for cutting them out of their life. I mean, seriously, who would want someone like that around who's gonna put you down and try and take advantage of your kindness? That's inappropriate and nobody deserves that. So good for the original poster for trying to preserve their own personal happiness. Because at the end of the day, when all else fails, truly all you do have is that person in the mirror. And just like the original poster said, I really do agree that you need to be kind to that person, especially when everybody else around you decides to put you down. My boyfriend of 7 years is requesting that we take a 1-year-long break so he can figure out what he truly wants out of his life. And I'm honestly so appalled, and I simply don't know what to do. So my boyfriend and I have been together since we were about 20 years old, and for the most part, our relationship was pretty good. We can communicate pretty well our wants and needs, so it's been a very healthy relationship overall. A couple of days ago, I noticed that something was bothering him, so I asked him what was going on. He said he doesn't feel as good as he used to. He's not okay with where he is now in his life. He doesn't like his job, his economics, or basically his life in general. The only thing he said is good in his life is me, and that doesn't make him feel fulfilled. We've been talking nonstop this past few days, while also shedding many tears. At the beginning, I was scared because I didn't want the relationship to end, but the more we talked, the more I feel I don't deserve this situation. I know that this is not a me problem, but instead this is a problem with him, his life, and his goals. I can't think for him and I cannot be happy for him. I'm exhausted at the end of every conversation, as he ends up telling me that even though he wants to discover himself, the only thing he is sure of is that he doesn't want to live without me. But then the next morning, he wakes up confused with what he really wants in his life. He's come up with this idea that maybe we could take a 1-year-long break so he can try and find himself and then come back to me. And when I heard this, I was honestly stunned. I honestly think that's awful. And I told him that I love him so much, and probably in a year I will still love him the same, but I don't deserve that. I won't be sitting with my arms folded just waiting, and I will probably resent him a lot, so that won't work for me. If he stays, then he stays, and I will commit to work things out in therapy. But if he does leave with the expectation that he can just have me back in a year, then it's done. Our relationship is over. He said the most important thing for him is my happiness, and I deserve a concrete answer of what his choice will be. But he wants time to think about it, and is requesting about a month to think about it. But now I'm asking myself, what do I want? Honestly, him pulling this stunt destroyed what little trust I had in him in the first place. So I don't know if now I should leave or if I should stick around. What should I do? I think this sounds absolutely ridiculous. This guy wants a 1-year break from the relationship and just expects you to sit around and wait for him to get his stuff figured out. What he is asking for is a break, but in reality, he is breaking up with you. He is putting on hold your relationship just so he can figure out who knows what. And that's not fair for you in the slightest. And if I was in your shoes, there's no way I would put up with that, not for a second. So you know what? If he wants to be free, let him free. And that includes him taking a month to figure things out. There's no reason for you to be left in limbo and try and figure out what he wants out of his life. Because clearly, even though he says, "Oh, your happiness is all that matters to me," his actions and his attitude are saying something different. Like, his logic just doesn't make any sense. His life sucks, so now he's gonna get rid of the one person who makes his life a little bit better? I mean, that's honestly just so counterintuitive, it's not even funny. So hopefully, for the sake of your life and what you want out of this relationship, you put yourself first and figure out what you want with your life. Because waiting a month or even a year for him to figure out his is only a waste of time for you, and something that I consider, in my opinion, something that's not worth your time and not something that you should wait on. An entitled Karen demands my Spider-Man toy for her child, stating that he needs it so much more than I do, and even going as far as showing up at our house at 2 in the morning, demanding that we hand it over. But my mom sets this lady straight and tells her to get lost. Here's what happened. So this would be a very complicated story if I had to explain all the idiosyncrasies of my family, but I will try to cut things short and simplify it as much as possible. So there's this cousin of mine, and he's an only child of a mom who had him when she thought she couldn't be a mom anymore. So in having that child, she spoiled that boy like crazy. He could always manipulate his mother into doing whatever he wanted, simply by pretending to be sick and saying something along the lines of, "I think I'm gonna be sick." Here are just some of the examples off the top of my head of him being spoiled. For starters, whenever he didn't want to eat, his mother would put his food in the blender and give it to him so he didn't have to chew it. Yeah, absolutely disgusting if you ask me. Also, his mother would cut up his food, like a piece of meat or a sausage or something like this, and has done that all the way up until present day. And at this time, he's still 28 years old. And I'm not talking in the sense of like she is cutting the food for him to show affection here or there. I'm talking in the middle of a barbecue or around a bunch of grown people playing football, or even when he's drinking and eating, he would fix himself a plate, go to his mother, and ask him to cut up the meat for him. This was literally the last interaction I had with him. And we tried talking to him since he was like 15 or so, but that in and of itself was just incredibly weird. Anyway, so in the past when he was about 7 or 8 years old, the Spider-Man trilogy with Tobey Maguire was the hot stuff on the town. And my grandfather had a client of his that was the owner of a company that made toys. So he would give me and my brother the catalogs with the toys of the season when he visited us. At the time, we lived in a small town, and he lived in a big city, about 2 to 4 hours away, depending on the traffic. So he and my grandmother would visit us frequently. He requested that we choose a few toys for our birthdays, as well as something for Christmas, as well as Easter. So being the superhero fan that I always was, I asked him for the Green Goblin and the Spider-Man action figures. And boy oh boy, they were the two best toys I've ever gotten to this day. They were simply magical. I slept with him by my side, and happily so. And it was even during the time when I was slowly overcoming my fear of sleeping alone. So in the next interaction that my brother and I had with my cousin, we brought the toy out, which was as detailed and realistic as possible. It was works of art, and I honestly loved it. But you know what? So did my cousin, specifically the Spider-Man, which was both of our favorite superheroes, and he played with it all day long, which was no problem for me, as long as I could get it back and have it with me when I sleep. Well, fast forward to 2 in the morning, and according to my mom, my mother receives a call from my cousin's mother, and again, according to my mom, you would think that this kid was on the verge of collapsing, and that the only antidote was the Spider-Man action figure, especially by the tone of her voice and the things that she said. She asked if she could come by, go to my room, and get the toy, and of course, that would wake me up as well as my brother up in the process, but this entitled mother definitely did not care. She also asked if my mother could do her a favor and just deliver it to her house. Now, according to my cousin's mom, he was apparently sweating and he has a high fever, and that all he can say is that he wants the Spider-Man toy, and he was saying this as dramatic as possible, as if he was about to meet God himself in a few minutes unless he got it. Well, my mother was not having it. She promptly and very angrily told her that I was asleep and I had to wake up at 7 in the morning, and that it was not only dangerous to go out at night to do some stupid stuff like this, but driving while sleepy was also very, very dangerous. And after that, my mom said goodnight and hung up the phone. Now you might think this is the end of it, but not even 20 minutes later, my cousin's mother is at the front gate of our house honking the horn, demanding once again that we hand over the Spider-Man toy. But my mom simply was not having it. She stated that she would not give her the toy and that her kid would just have to deal with it and learn to take no for an answer. And to this day, even though several years have passed since that incident, this entitled mother still hates my mom as well as me to this day. How weird can you possibly get? I mean, this lady seriously drove at 2 in the morning to try and steal this original poster's toy, all because their spoiled child was pretending to be sick just so they could have this toy for themselves. I mean, how obnoxious can you get? And clearly this kid is just playing his mom. He has got her wrapped around his finger so easily, this kid can absolutely get whatever he wants. And that is so bad for a kid growing up. And I mean, the proof is right there. This guy is now 28 years old and his mom still cuts up his food for him. Like, this guy needs a wake-up call big time. So good for the original poster's mother for laying down the law and saying, no, your kid can't have this. Because caving to that demand would have been absolutely tragic. Because there's honestly no good excuse for showing up at that time, demanding something that is honestly so frivolous. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. This next one came from the Am I the Jerk podcast subreddit. Check the links in the description if you'd like to submit your own story. Am I the jerk for helping some nurses put an entitled Karen in her place? So today, my 6-year-old son unfortunately hurt his hand, probably a broken finger, but we will see what the x-rays say. My wife collected him from his school holiday program and took him to the emergency room with our infant daughter in tow. She rang me at work to let me know what was going on. The wait in the emergency room was expected to be a few hours, so I told my wife I'd swing by home after work and collect some snacks with our son's iPad to keep him entertained. I'd also take our daughter back home. So I locked up work, picked up the iPad and some snacks, and went to the medical center. By this time, my wife and kids had been there a couple of hours. I checked the waiting room and they had been called back already, so I went to the main desk to find my way to them. Behind the counter were 2 nurses, and the younger one was in tears. The other one was consoling her, so apparently I had just missed quite the show. They had just put an entitled Karen into a vacant doctor's room. She had been making a scene in the waiting room, hurling all sorts of horrible statements around, complaining about the waiting time. The younger nurse had tried to explain that they are a trauma center, and patients were seen in the order of their severity, not necessarily in the order in which they arrive. But this entitled Karen was having none of it, and berated the junior nurse to the point where she was crying. The entitled Karen may have thought that she'd won at this point, getting into an examination room, but all she had really achieved was sitting on her own while she waited. The nurse saw me at the desk. I gave my son's name to her and explained that I'm just here to drop off some things and get the baby. The nurse said she's in room 5 and she'll take me down there. And that's when the older nurse stepped in and told the junior nurse to take me past room 2, where the entitled Karen was simmering away in her fury. She then asked me a favor. Can you pretend you're a patient for us? We just need you to walk past this room. So I decided, okay, and I agreed. I work in retail, and I understand the desire to troll a Karen. The nurse smiled and I followed her down the corridor. The nurse motioned to me as we approached room 2. I put on a limp and hobbled past the open door. Inside was the Karen, dressed to the nines, scrolling through her phone and impatiently tapping her foot on the floor. We locked eyes and I struggled to hide a smirk. Once we had just passed out of Karen's sight, I said to the nurse, "Thank you for getting me in so quickly. I thought I'd be waiting all night with this sprained ankle," and it was loud and clear, with all the fake grimaces I could muster. The nurse couldn't hide her glee. "No trouble," she replied through a massive grin. "The doctor will see you right away." The reaction was immediate. An almighty scream of frustration erupts from room 2. Then the phone flies out the door, clattering against the wall on the opposite side of the corridor. The nurse and I kept going down the corridor to where my wife and children were waiting. I checked in on everyone, dropped off the snacks, and grabbed our daughter to take her home. I then walked back down the corridor past room 2 again. The Karen was still there, now on her feet and pacing around the room. I caught her eye again and acknowledged her with a nod. As I strode past, my limp mysteriously gone. I saw the fire ignite in her eyes again as I went past, and her rage continued as I went back out through the waiting area, waving to the 2 nurses as my daughter and I left the building. I am glad I was able to help out the nurses in dealing with this Karen. Nobody deserves to be berated in their workplace like that. In hindsight, hindsight though, despite her attitude, the entitled Karen may have had some legitimate reason for being there at the doctor's, and I could have been trolling someone genuinely needing help. So it begs the question, am I the jerk for doing what I did for the nurses? I don't think you're the jerk at all. The way she was acting was incredibly inappropriate, and there's no reason to freak out like that and to act like such a jerk. So in my opinion, I don't think you're the jerk. But what do you think? Would you have gone along with what the nurse requested, or would you have just wanted to get to the room with your family? Let us know down below. Today, I messed up by making fun of a guy who doesn't know how to do his own laundry, and as a result, he is incredibly offended. Here's what happened. So I started seeing this guy about 3 weeks ago. Now let me be clear, we have known each other for a long time because he was a friend of my cousin. He asked me out a few weeks ago and I said yes. I have known him since I was like 15. I also know his family too because our moms were colleagues. So anyway, he came to my house 5 days ago to pick me up because we were having a picnic date. I was in the living room watching the kids show Phineas and Ferb. I really like this show. I have been watching the reruns ever since I was a kid. This cartoon had a huge impact on my life. I still watch it whenever my mood is off so that I can still cling on to the innocent child inside me. I was laughing at some part of the show and he was standing next to me and it looked like he was a little confused based on his expression. He asked me if my nephew was in the house and I told him no. He then asked me who it is that's watching this cartoon since all of my family members are adults. So I told him that I'm watching it and I really like this cartoon. I then proceed to tell him that I still watch this particular cartoon because it was a part of my childhood and I have some good memories linked to it. He told me it is really embarrassing and ridiculous. And when he said this, I asked him why. And that's when he told me something that really offended me. He told me that I'm a 24-year-old woman. Why am I watching something for kids? He also then said that I need to grow up. And when he said this really bothered me because I don't think there's an age limit to watching cartoons. Since that day, he would constantly make fun of me. Whenever we go to a restaurant, he would jokingly order from the kids menu. He would talk to me in a baby voice as if I was a kid. And whenever I would tell him to stop, he would say, "Oh, are you gonna get mad? That's cute." And sometimes even use phrases like young lady. It was really frustrating. Today, we went to a party and his friends were there too. I was meeting them for the first time. He introduced me. He then tells them how I still watch cartoons and they all laughed. He also made fun of my height too. For context, I'm 5'4" and he is 6'1". He then proceeds to shuffle my hair like most people do on kids, and I got mad. I then told him, it's funny how he makes fun of me being a kid, yet he still needs his mommy to do his laundry. And when I said that, his smile just wiped off of his face. I further said, well, at least this kid knows how to clean up after herself and knows how to drive, unlike him, who failed the driving test 2 times. And after I said that, the room went completely silent. Later, when I got home, I got calls from my cousin that I overreacted and that I embarrassed him in front of his friends, while also claiming that he was right to make fun of me because who watches cartoons when they are adults? I told her I am not interested in entertaining boys who feel like they can make fun of anyone they want, but when someone does the exact same thing to them, they act like little babies. And that was probably the shortest relationship I have ever had in my life. That guy the original poster was dating is absolutely toxic. I mean, seriously, you're dating a woman that you're just now getting to know, and you're seriously gonna start making fun of her, even after she said, hey, could you cut it out? And it would be one thing to do it in private, where it's just little jabs at each other that maybe you need to reel in because it's offending her or something like that. But he decided, you know what, I'm going to embarrass her in front of all my friends. Like, that's not a good characteristic to have, and it doesn't make you a good person. Instead, this guy turned into a giant bully, and just like most bullies, they cannot take what they're dishing out. So in my opinion, it was fantastic to hear that the original poster gave this guy a taste of his own medicine. Probably doesn't feel very good now, does it? So I think you dodged a massive nightmare, because if there's anyone in this situation who is clearly not grown up, I would be more than willing to put my money on this guy, just with how sensitive he is and how easily offended he became. My boss gave me criticism, claiming that I was making others uncomfortable, while also never providing me with any example so that I can try to adjust my behavior. So in protest, I decided to stop talking, and because of my lack of participation, the entire office went into a tailspin, causing massive damages that I easily could have fixed. Here's what happened. So about 10 years ago, I worked in a team of scientists, when one day our boss told me others perceive me as contemptuous. I was shocked beyond words. I certainly did not feel superior or feel contempt for anyone one. I was so flabbergasted, I was silent for probably 2 solid minutes. I asked for an example of when something I had said or done gave someone that feeling. He said he couldn't divulge that information. Okay, then I asked for an example that he experienced or observed himself. He said that he had none. So I said to him, since I have no clue what I've done, how am I supposed to adjust my behavior? And he said he didn't know. So I said, basically then, I just need to not talk. And he said he wasn't sure. I knew right then and there what to do. I am pretty introverted, and as a child, I didn't talk for years. I rarely spoke up until I was about 13 years old. I got lots of notes from teachers about how quiet I was. I would answer questions when directly asked, but rarely spoke up otherwise. So my malicious compliance in this situation was easy for me. I just stopped talking, except when asked a question. I made a point of smiling, showing that I was listening, as well as nodding in agreement or anything else with a conversation. I was extremely polite and agreeable. Pretty soon, some big issues came up that I had specific knowledge about. I knew how to solve them, but no one else asked me. A huge conflict came up between 2 of our labs because one group wanted it one way and the other group had a different opinion. They fought and fought. People were having secret meetings in their offices to try and win this situation. And when they finally arrived at the action they chose, it was wrong. In fact, both groups were wrong, and the whole experiment failed. It is important to know that no one was hurt, no property damage or anything like that, just a lot of wasted time and expense on materials. But I never said a word, and this went on for 3 weeks. The lab's budget had to be revised. They had to cut travel expenses, which I was okay with, because I didn't want to travel anyways. So no conferences for anyone. Now, this is a big deal for a lot of researchers, because it's how we gain notoriety to be able to get grants, among other things. Finally, a colleague asked me why I hadn't spoken for so long. Why was I so quiet? Was something wrong? I then explained about being told others perceive me as contemptuous. She had the same expression I did when I was told this. She said she didn't believe anyone had said that about me. I honestly was surprised again, because I believed our boss. Then she asked me what I thought about the experiment design and why it was failing. I told her about the solution that I believe would work, which was actually surprisingly simple. She recognized it had a good chance of succeeding and asked me to share the idea at the next department meeting. At that meeting, she asked me again in front of everyone, and I repeated what I told her. Several people asked why I hadn't spoken up sooner. I explained that I had been given feedback that indicated I caused others to feel uncomfortable. The whole table of colleagues also looked stunned at me. I said I was committed to not causing such bad feelings, and I couldn't figure out how to communicate because the feedback didn't give me any specific guidance. Everyone looked at the director at that point, and he said we shouldn't discuss personal issues. But it was my issue, so I said, if anyone here perceives me as contemptuous and said as much to our boss, that's the reason I haven't been talking. If you don't feel that way about me, let me know and I will stop being silent. Someone else said that we needed to hold a vote so that there wouldn't be any more confusion or talking behind anyone's back. They voted 100% for me to talk normally and that they didn't agree that I was ever contemptuous. That director slowly stopped coming to work, month by month after this episode, until he was only showing up 1 day a week. Finally, he took a lab position elsewhere, and one of my colleagues was promoted to director, and the experiment was a success. The next year, I got a grant to keep the research going and paid for 2 people to be able to travel to the related conference to present our findings. So overall, things kind of worked out in the end. That boss is an absolute piece of garbage. The fact that they would not only make up this kind of criticism, but then also not give you any examples to try and help you adjust your behavior is incredibly toxic. They quite literally caused so much damage to this lab by basically lying to this person, or at least projecting their own feelings onto this person, and pointlessly causing conflict. I mean, that is an awful director, manager, whatever you want to call them. And I am really glad that you addressed this publicly and got it out in the open, because this kind of behavior is absolutely ridiculous. And if I was in the shoes of the original poster, I would have done the same thing. Oh, I'm being contemptuous? All right, fine, I just won't talk anymore. Let's see how far you guys can get. Because how can someone possibly change if they're never told how to change? So honestly, it's a good thing that terrible director got kicked out, because they clearly did not have your best interest in mind, and they honestly had no clue what they were doing. My manager constantly made fun of us and pitted us against each other as employees. So I quit my job without properly teaching him how to do my job or teach my coworkers how to to fill in when he inevitably fails. Here's what happened. 3 years ago, I started working in a company where my manager was an absolute piece of garbage to me that would insult us and blame any problem on his employees, with the sole goal of trying to get us against each other. I got burned out after about a year, and this was after 10-hour days and weekends, where I would be performing tasks that were greatly above my paycheck and completely different from what I was promised as I got there. So I gave my resignations. My manager thought I was useless, as he often said about anyone but himself. So instead of trying to find a new employee, he decided he would have to take over my role, much to the demise of my coworkers. The only problem was, I was the only person who knew perfectly some of the ERP programs that the company uses, and I would have had to teach him my 1.5 years of experience in 2 weeks. As I started to teach him, he got more and more frustrated, as well as terrified by the amount of workload that was coming his way, and as a result, he started to insult me even more. But I was still trying to teach him the best I could for the sake of my coworkers. All of this until the first day of my last week. I was pointing out a mistake that he was making every time he did a certain task, and he replied to me by screaming at me to shut up. I don't need you to act like a teacher. So, feeling petty, I decided to enact some malicious compliance. So instead of helping him out, I just sat beside him for the next and last 5 days, not teaching him anything. And every time he couldn't remember how to do something, I would jokingly cheer him up, telling him I was sure he could come up with a solution himself if he just focused enough. When problems would come up that I still didn't have the time to solve, I would tell him, I don't know how this thing happened. It never happened to me. You should contact the client service. They taught me everything I know. The peak of this was when he got so frustrated that he started repeatedly slamming the mouse against the desk and then sat there staring blankly at the screen for 10 minutes. I had to actually keep myself from laughing in his face. After I left, I spent the next 2 months getting called almost daily by all my ex-colleagues, asking for them to help me find files or to solve problems that they couldn't find an answer for, and stuff that I didn't have time to teach them as I had to stay with a manager all the time. But thankfully, I don't work there anymore, so I honestly could care less how that business goes. That is honestly how it should be done in my opinion. If your manager is going to be that toxic to you and treat you like garbage on a daily basis, they can't possibly expect you to want to stick around. So truly, good riddance. You do not need that kind of energy in your life, and if any of your ex-coworkers are upset by the state of that office, they can look to your manager as the reason why things suck. Because if they just listened, they wouldn't be in this mess in the first place. And if they had actually treated their employees with respect, then just maybe one of the most valuable ones would have stuck around. An entitled Karen steals my entire vegetable garden, claiming that because she lives in the neighborhood, she has full permission to go into my side yard and take all of my vegetables. Things got so bad that we had to threaten to call the police on them just to try and get them to stop. Here's what happened. So to start off, we have a not so small vegetable garden in the backyard of my family's house. Me and my mom are the gardeners, and we grow a bunch of zucchini, snap peas, herbs, broccoli, carrots, tomatoes, all kinds of vegetables in the back garden. Well, one day, I hear something outside my window, which is right above the largest planter box in our garden. I look outside, and I see 2 kids from the neighborhood picking vegetables from the planter box. So immediately, I run out, and I see the 2 of them with arms full of zucchini and carrots, and even some tomatoes. I asked them what on earth they're doing, and they just said, "We live in the neighborhood," which seemed like a weird explanation. So I told them that those are our vegetables and they can't have them. But they just said, "It's our neighborhood too. We can have them if we want." And they then took off before I could stop them, literally vaulting over our small fence that separates our side yard from the neighbors. A few days later, I heard something out my window again, and I look out and I see the kid's mom loading up a basket with vegetables from the planter. I again rush out and see that this entitled Karen and her kids are loading baskets with everything they could grab. I watched as this entitled Karen grabbed a handful of chives that I had been growing and literally ripped them out, roots and all. My mom must have heard me run out because she came outside as well. She started screaming, demanding to know what they were doing in our backyard. All the while, the kids just kept picking vegetables while the mom just turned around annoyed. She looked at us and said, "It's everyone's neighborhood and we need the food." And she said this still while picking from the garden, completely desecrating my prized chives. My mom then told this entitled Karen that if she had just asked us, we would have happily given her some some of our vegetables that we spent so much time trying to grow. And even if it's everyone's neighborhood, it is our garden. This entitled Karen then huffed and puffed and left with her kids, and there literally wasn't anything that we could do about it. After the entitled Karen left, our garden was damaged beyond repair. Our zucchini plants were torn to bits, and the peas and tomatoes were trampled and shredded, and our grape bush that we had spent years growing was completely snapped in two at the base, where one of them had stepped on it. There were no fresh vegetables that year, and my mom couldn't make her chocolate chip zucchini bread that she normally loves to make. A few days later, we installed a lock on the backyard fence, and the neighbors came banging on our door, mad that we installed a lock, preventing them from getting into our garden. But my mom just told them to go away, and if she saw them in our garden again, she would call the cops. We thankfully never saw them again, and our garden is happy now, as my mom and I managed to bring the grapes back to life and tried our very best to restore the garden back to what it was. Fast forward, and not too long ago, we planted some blueberry bushes in our front yard, and as you could probably guess, someone keeps stealing them, and half the blueberries are gone each season. We let the kids in the neighborhood eat them, but they only take like 8 or 10 of them at most. There are 10 bushes in total, with about 100 to 150 blueberries on each bush, so it really makes you wonder who in the neighborhood would steal a couple hundred blueberries every year. Now, we haven't caught them yet, but everyone knows what's going on, and it's only a matter of time until this entitled Karen and her stupid children are caught in the act. What an awful situation. These people actually broke into your backyard and quite literally robbed you blind. I mean, they're taking baskets full of vegetables, and with that description alone, I can only imagine what kind of garden you must have had. It very clearly must have been something serious, and it must have been devastating to have all of that hard work literally taken away from you by some selfish entitled Karen who clearly did not care about you or your property. And I think you've made some really good steps moving forward to ensure that your stuff is not stolen in the future. And what kind of logic is that? It's our neighborhood, so we could do what we want. Yeah, sure, but it's not your property. You can't just go on someone else's property and start stealing from them. Like, that's not okay. That would be like going to my neighbors and saying, hey, I like your Christmas lights, but we're neighbors and this is my neighborhood too. So guess what? Those lights are mine now. And just start ripping them off. Like, no, you can't do that. That's not okay. So if anything, I really hope the original poster gets some kind of security system with cameras pointed directly at your garden as well as your blueberry bushes. That way, if they're stupid enough to try and come back to your house, you will have this entitled Karen on recording, because I honestly think that might be the only way possible that you can catch her in the act and have any hope of even proving it. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My entitled coworker is on the verge of getting fired, and despite my attempts to try and help her in her situation, she decided to push me and my 25 years of experience on this subject matter off to the side, claiming that she could handle her termination meeting without my crucial involvement. And as a result, she dug her own grave and ended up getting fired. Here's what happened. So I work in a union shop, and I've been a shop steward for almost 25 years. In that time, I've seen some really crazy stuff, both figuratively and literally. And every single time, I've been unwary enough about how fate works to utter the words that now I've seen everything. But you know what? The universe will still inevitably hand me its beer and say, hey, watch this happen. Now, stewards, despite the general perception of us, are not there to defend employees who are accused of misconduct. We're there to defend the collective bargaining agreement, meaning that if you've really truly messed yourself up and your future with the agency we both work for, my role is primarily helping you determine which one of your options for leaving you're going to exercise. I've been at this rodeo for a long time, so management and I generally have a pretty good understanding of how things are going to go. So that is how we come upon Jackie. Jackie was one of those unbelievably toxic, peaked in high school cheerleader type of person with just enough understanding of what our employer does, how it's required to behave within federal guidelines, and what its obligations are, basically doing the bare minimum just to skirt the line. Now, to be clear, those things are not just the law, they're also morally right to be concerned about. And so my employer actually bends over backwards and does backflips to be absolutely certain that they're going above and beyond the minimum. Now, Jackie was not a minority in any sense. She was a female in a workplace that's 80% female, so that doesn't quite apply to this scenario. She may well have been disabled, but that was undiagnosed, and I'm inclined to think her claims of it, much like the rest of the things she said, were complete fabrications that she would just just make up. So the point at which I got involved was at the tail end of over a year's worth of actions by Jackie, in which it rapidly became apparent that her manager was in fact an excellent candidate for canonization. I got referred to her when one of my other union friends contacted me and said to me, "Hey, Jackie just got put on administrative leave and it's complete BS. Can you help?" I get referrals like this a lot, both because I've been around forever and because I have a pretty good track record for ensuring that people accused of stuff that they haven't actually done get treated fairly. So honestly, nothing stuck out to me as odd. I contacted Jackie and she had absolutely no idea why management would put her on administrative leave without any warning, as well as confiscate all of her agency-issued devices, including her access, while also instructing her that she was not to have any contact at all with anyone she worked with during work hours. Now this immediately sent off a whole host of red flags. For one thing, I know the senior HR guy that is the HR analyst's boss who's involved, having been down the road of difficult situations many times over the years. I don't always agree with him, but he is fair, and usually we can come to some kind of middle ground. But with that in mind, he would never suspend someone out of the blue without a really good reason. She knows what she's done. She simply has to. So I gave her my usual spiel of things to do and not do in this situation. I tell her, don't tell me or our employer things that aren't true, especially if you think it'll make you look bad if you don't. Also, don't talk to your coworkers. Don't talk to your friends about this, especially since you live in a town that has less than 2,000 people in it, and everyone knows everything about everyone else. Don't go to management or HR without me present, period. And when they do start asking questions, keep the answer simple. Basically, to the point, keep it short, and do not give lengthy explanations. Tell them what they want to know, and otherwise just shut up. Listen, I have been here and done this many times. I know this process very well. I can't tell you what they're going to do, but I can tell you what I think they're going to do. And I'm usually either right or pretty close to being right. Now, I have been surprised, but that doesn't happen often. Nearly 3 weeks then went by of radio silence from the agency, other than a bland sort of, "We want to talk with Jackie about utilization of work assignments, as well as some tasks and equipment." And this all came in an email that almost tells you nothing while still being literally true. Eventually and finally, it was go time for a meeting, and I did something I haven't done in a really long time. I physically drove to Jackie's work site instead of attending virtually. It was about an hour and a half each way, but I mean, why not? The weather was nice, so I just went ahead and did it. We met up ahead of going in, and I asked her if she remembered the rules I gave her at the beginning. She said that she did, and I asked her if she would follow them, and she said that she would be very careful, so we went in with that in mind. During the meeting, it was almost immediately obvious to me, from the questions that they started asking, that Jackie was in serious trouble. Not like written warning or pay reduction, nothing so simple. They were going to go for termination, and she was probably going to be very lucky if they decided not to refer to the DA for criminal prosecution. Here's an abbreviated summary of just the high points that basically put Jackie in hot water. For starters, Jackie had hundreds of confidential documents and electronic files in her personal possession, many of which fall squarely under HIPAA. She emailed these out from the government system to one of the 4 or 5 personal email addresses that she maintains. Jackie had also logged overtime without permission, and she did this a lot. And on one memorable date, when she was vacationing in Europe with her family at the time, she said that she called in to attend a meeting, but did not have an answer why that meeting had apparently been 11 and a half hours long, and nobody remembered her attending by phone. Jackie also had audio recordings of disabled and elderly people with whom she was working with, and that she had taken this kind of recordings without their consent or knowledge, and she did this a lot. Jackie's overall work product and system activity reliably showed that she was logged in at the start of the day from her home, and she worked some in the afternoon, but there were hours and hours of time when her computer was just simply idle. She explained this as participating in union activities, which I knew was complete BS. Now, Jackie is not a steward. Jackie has no idea what the collective bargaining agreement actually says about much of anything, beyond assuming that stewards can do whatever they want and management can't say anything, which is incredibly uninformed. At any rate, steward activity must be recorded and time-coded as such. Now, there is more than just this. There's so much more, but in the interest of brevity, I will summarize the next 4 months of my dealing with this woman by pointing back to the cardinal rules I gave her and simply inform you that she broke every single one of them, and I mean a lot. When it finally got to the dismissal hearing, that comes before the "you're fired, get out of here" letter, she told me going in that she wanted to run things because she had some stuff that she wanted to cover that she thought I probably wouldn't be comfortable doing, which is true because it was irrelevant. And also, she claimed that I didn't know much about the situation in general, so she felt like I wasn't really on her side in this situation to begin with. I look at her and I say, I really don't think that's a good idea. I have done a lot of these and you really should let me handle it. But Jackie looks at me and says, no, I know what I'm doing, and I talked to my attorney about this a lot. You can't stop me. I look at her and I say, yeah, you're right, I can't. But this isn't going to go the way you think it will. Jackie kept saying that she knows she's right and that they can't do this to me. But I said to her again, this is not a good idea, but okay, it's your show, go for it. So in we went and I sat down. The senior HR guy I mentioned earlier was there, and he gave me a funny look when I sat back with my laptop closed and said nothing. Dismissal meetings are actually our meeting, and we get to run them from start to finish. Everyone else is there just to listen. She started talking, and I have to give them credit, they took notes. They listened to the things that she said and kept straight faces the entire time, and it went exactly as I figured that it would. Just the things they'd asked her about in the first several meetings I attended with Jackie had covered fireable offenses on at least 4 or 5 different subjects, all independent of one another. At the end, when she finally wound down, they all turned to me, Jackie included, and asked if I had anything I wanted to cover or that I thought may have been missed. I looked at them all and I said, nope, I think she covered everything actually. I don't have anything to add. That afternoon, I got the union copy of her dismissal notice. Generally, they are open to at least discussing the option of the worker resigning and giving them a neutral reference going forward, but that wasn't in the cards. The last I had heard of Jackie, the Department of Justice was involved with her and her husband, and I'm reasonably confident that it didn't go well for her either. I do know that she will never work for the government again, as the letter was pretty explicit about what information they would release to any government agency asking for a reference. So as it went down, they had more than enough evidence to terminate her completely, and it literally is her own fault. Yeah, Jackie sounds like she was in a lot of trouble, like serious hot water. Not only was there time theft, but she was recording people without their consent and transferring electronic documents that were super confidential. Like, in my opinion, that lady definitely deserves to get fired. And the way that she was treating the one person who was gonna be on her side and basically pushed her aside and said, no, I'm gonna handle it. I bet at this point Jackie's probably kicking herself, because I bet the original poster, who has been doing this for 25 years, mind you, probably could have saved them to some extent in this situation. So honestly, this is not anybody's fault except for Jackie's. The original poster is not a jerk, and they did the right thing. I mean, Jackie made her wishes very clear. She wanted to handle the meeting that she literally did not know what she was getting into. Because at the end of the day, I bet the original poster, even if they were involved in this process and tried to say something on the behalf of Jackie, it probably still would not be enough to save her from the hammer of justice that was very clearly falling on her. So I guess the moral of the story is that sometimes you just gotta look to the person who clearly knows what they're doing. And if 25 years of experience isn't enough evidence for you to understand that, yeah, they probably can help you get out of this mess, then just like with Jackie, I literally don't think anything could save you here. My wife is lying about our son beating her at chess, despite the fact that she is rated 2300 and is incredibly good. And I simply can't get the truth out of her, and I don't know what to do. So I have an odd and very specific issue with my wife, and I wanted some perspective on it. So for a bit of context, my wife is really good at chess, and I mean like really good. She used to play in tournaments. She is a titled player, with her peak rating being about 2350, so she is very good. And for context, I am not very good. I enjoy the game, but I am nowhere near her. My online rating is maybe half hers if I'm lucky. Recently, our 10-year-old son has started to show an interest in chess, and we have been teaching him the game. Before we began teaching him, my wife and I had talked and come to the agreement that it would not benefit him to go easy on him or let him win. It was better to play at our actual strengths and help him understand the game, help him learn to analyze his games, replay the critical positions, and understand where he could make improvements or choose a different line to play in the game. We were totally on the same page for this, completely in agreement. However, when my wife plays with our son, she has been letting him win. Mind you, she is 2350. She is incredibly good. Now, she is obviously not playing anywhere near her real strength, and after about 30 games between them over the course of the last few weeks, he has a positive score against her, which is crazy. For context, over the 16 years that we have been together, I've had about 1,000 games with my wife. And out of all of those games, I have never beaten her. Not once, not ever, not a single game. She just demolishes me, completely rolls me off the board. Once, about 5 years ago when she had the flu, I drew her in a perpetual check from a losing position, and I was very proud of that. I hold that as one of the strongest games I've ever played. The only way I'm winning a chess game against my wife is if she falls asleep at the board and I win on time. She is just that far beyond me. Now, here's where the issues begin. When I try to talk to her about it, she just straight up lies to me. She flatly insists that she's playing to her full strength and all of his wins are legitimate, which is simply not true at all. And before I get the suggestion of somebody saying that he might just be a prodigy of some kind and that the two of them are playing at the level that I can't understand, that is simply not the case. I have observed their games and he is playing like a beginner. I have even plugged some of their games into an engine and the engine will just break down crying at how bad the play is on both sides. It's not a subjective interpretation. These games are objectively bad. My wife is simply refusing to capture hanging pieces for multiple turns, intentionally making bad trades, making anti-positional moves that make no sense, refusing to execute extremely simple combinations that even I can see. Like, my wife can see mate in 3. She can probably even see mate in 15. So the idea that she is just simply missing those things is absolutely nonsensical. Now, when I play my son, I completely crush him. I'm not blaming him, he's still learning the game, but he's still at the level where he can fall for the scholar's mate and making one-move blunders. That's just where he is. When I try to talk to my wife about it, she insists up and down that she's playing as well as she can, and she's so earnest about it that it's almost like she genuinely believes it. I'm going as far as even beginning to worry about some kind of mental illness. Like, I have no idea what is going on here. I've never had anything like this with her because normally we are very communicative, so this really is out of left field for her and truly very odd. I've tried talking with her about it multiple times now, but I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. I don't even know how to discuss this with her when we can't even agree on what is objectively happening in reality. It's like trying to discuss how to build a sailboat when you can't even agree on what water is, or if cloth and wood are things that actually exist in reality. I don't even know how to start a conversation here. As it stands, my son won't play with me anymore because I always win and it's disheartening for him. If it was simply a case of my wife seeing that he needs a confidence boost, as well as her changing her mind about letting him win, I of course would have zero problem with that. I'm 100% on board. We can totally do that. I've even said that directly to her, but she's very adamant that she's not going easy on him in any way. The issue isn't that she's letting him win, it's that she's refusing to admit it. It's just so bizarre. She's just blatantly insisting that reality isn't real, and I honestly don't know what to do. It's pretty obvious that your wife is letting this kid win. She's rated 2350. That is not an easy rank to get to. For context, most people would not get ranked higher than 1800. Like, that is probably the peak of most people in the world. So she is a cut above the rest, almost in the professional standard. So I completely agree with the original poster here. She is absolutely letting this kid win. But honestly, it's probably for the best. This kid has already decided that he's not going to play against the original poster because they keep losing all the time. There's no confidence boost, there's nothing like that, and it's no longer fun. So it's not out of the question for her to just completely let this kid win. But I think there's also some kind of pride issue going on. I don't think she's mentally declining. I think she literally just doesn't want you involved in this process, or at least it kind of seems that way. She most likely just wants her son to have some kind of interest in chess. That's my perspective at least. Maybe she thinks that if she just lets him win and allows him to gain some kind of confidence, that eventually she can get him up to a level where he would be really, really good. And I also really don't like the original poster's approach to trying to play his wife when she's sick just to try and get a win. Like, I get it, you're not that good at chess, but it seems like it's almost obsessive for you at this point. Like, your wife is clearly encouraging him to do better, whereas you are just trying to win. And hopefully you can see the difference of opinions. And maybe the reason why she can't talk to you about this specifically is probably just that. She probably just can't talk to you about it. You can say that you're on board and you want to teach this kid chess, but compared to her, you literally don't know what you're doing. So hopefully there's some kind of middle ground that can be found here. Because based on what you've described, I think there might be some stuff going on with the way you act that's causing her to want to shut down and pretend like he really is playing at his best. Because at the end of the day, he is a 10-year-old kid, and if he doesn't enjoy this game, then he really will drop it aside and never play it again. My entitled aunt plays her Christian songs at all hours of the night, and despite my honest request for her to simply turn them down so I can try and get some sleep, she takes it personally and basically implies that I'm trying to censor her, which honestly is not the case, but at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So I want to open this off with a statement that I have nothing against people of religious faith. I understand that our ideals do not align, and I respect that. With that out of the way, I want to tell you about an unpleasant trait that my aunt has that bothers not just me, but also my neighbors. My aunt has been resurfacing lately her faith. She is Roman Catholic, and she recently hit a rough patch in her life, and she found solace again in religion, and she won't hesitate to let you know. She'd tell you about how she cries every time in worship, how she'd always somehow work her faith into the most absurd of topics. We generally seem to get along, aside from one altercation where she expressed disgust towards my personal preference in who I do and don't find attractive. But other than that, she treats me well, and at the end of the day, respects me as a person. And by respect, I mean that in the sense that she at least has the decency to at least hide her distaste in me based on my personal preferences of who I find attractive, if you know what I mean. She is generally a very nice person and has little to no beef with anyone in her life. That is, except for how she chooses to continue her faith. Aside from what she already does with her faith, another way she'll let you know is by playing loud variations of praise and worship hill songs. She would play these songs even in the dead of night, where everybody who is normal would be asleep. She'd have Christian rock in the background playing at all hours of the night. Granted, I don't fully understand why she does this, but I also know that you really shouldn't do this when almost everyone in the neighborhood unanimously agrees that you should maybe tone it down a bit, especially in the middle of the night. And in fact, one time I tried to do that, and when I asked her if she could just turn it down, she got a bit touchy and asked me if I even understood God at all. The point is, I don't really, but it's irritating having the same old song played over and over again. It also doesn't help that it wasn't exactly the genre I was into. I once turned her music down, and she turned this into some kind of argument with a rant about how I don't appreciate the things that she does for me. My parents are practically non-existent anymore. We've been living with her since they're falling out, and yes, she does provide for the house. I also do try and chip in with the work regularly, and I carry mine and my sister's weight every now and then. But back to the music thing. We'd all be kept awake each night with some kind of praise song or some variation of it, playing at all hours of the night. And if that's not the case, when I do schoolwork at home, it was honestly very hard for me to focus. She wouldn't turn it down, not out of spite, but she really legitimately just did not want to. I want to set up some kind of intervention with her and my grandparents soon to try and get this thing out of the way. It's also probably worth mentioning that we had never gotten a single noise complaint ever, just slightly annoyed neighbors irritably knocking on our door. But with all things considered, I honestly don't know what to do. It really does seem like your aunt is really being disrespectful towards you. Like if she wants to worship and have some kind of faith in whatever she believes in, then go for it. And I honestly don't think there's anything wrong with playing music that is affirming towards your faith. That's probably a good thing, and it probably helps her feel better about herself, as well as more connected towards her faith. Like literally, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But she's being very belligerent about it and refusing to turn down these songs, especially in the middle of the night. I mean, I really don't think it's irrational to simply ask her to turn down the music. This is not about you trying to limit her faith or in some way try to censor her from not expressing her faith openly. That's not the point here. The point is that she's making a lot of noise and it's disturbing your peace. And sure, you haven't gotten a formal complaint about any kind of noise, but that doesn't give her the right to play her music on full blast in the middle of the night. That is disrespectful and very unkind to those around you. And you can bet that if the roles were reversed, she would not be happy with you playing your music when she's trying to sleep. So hopefully there's some kind of middle ground here, because I think what you're asking for is not that big of a deal, and it really does seem like she's making mountains out of molehills in this situation, and that in and of itself, in my opinion, is super obnoxious. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My ex kicked me out and ghosted me after a messy breakup, but after finding out that I'm struggling with a serious mental health disorder, I feel like I deserve a second chance with her, but I'm honestly not sure and I simply don't know what to do. So I met my ex a year and a half ago, initially hooking up based on physical attraction, but slowly turning into a real relationship as we got closer. It became a very loving and fulfilling relationship, but we both suffered from depression and would end up fighting over something small once a month, as she had issues with her anger. Usually I had done done something and just needed to apologize for it. But her overreactions made it difficult for me, and I wouldn't back down. Eventually, as this anger got worse, I would break down and enter a depressive episode that caused some terrible thoughts. And these awful thoughts had only been triggered before by alcohol. I was also entering a deeper overall depression, letting my weight go and losing my job temporarily. Before Christmas, things got worse, and eventually she disappeared on Boxing Day. I went into an episode and called her over and over again, messaged her friends, and massively overreacted. That night, we agreed to end the relationship. We were living together at this point, and she just stopped talking to me almost immediately. She would barely be home. I would plead and plead to talk about it or to work it out, and she would refuse. On New Year's Eve, I had another episode, triggered by drinking too much, and sent her some nasty text messages. As I had become paranoid, she was seeing someone else almost immediately. When I woke up and read them, I couldn't believe all that I had written. I was disgusted in myself, and I knew I needed help. She kicked me out immediately and completely ghosted me. The few days after I was kicked out, I gained a new perspective on things and became extremely overconfident, working out how I was going to fix my life, and tried leaving her flowers at her place, which I understand now was inappropriate, but seemed like a great idea at the time. I have since talked to my doctor and a therapist since then, and they think I might be displaying signs of bipolar disorder, as my father had it and my manic and depressive episodes match over the last few months. I don't believe it excuses anything that I did, but I do think it changes the situation. I sent a short, respectful text message telling her that I may have it and apologizing for how I handled things, but she read it and continued to ghost me. Now, this post may frame her as being an angry or terrible person, but she is a kind and lovely woman that was very damaged from her upbringing and cuts anyone who hurts her from her life. I now realize how easy it would be to deal with her issue if I was in a healthy mindset and medicated. I have continued putting everything into getting healthy physically and mentally. My question to you is, do you think I deserve a second chance if I'm diagnosed with a legitimate mental illness? I'd love some perspective on this complicated topic, as I honestly don't know what to do. So to answer your question, do you deserve a second chance? Absolutely. There's no reason you can't find another relationship and try again, knowing exactly what you should and shouldn't do, as well as what your triggers are and all the things that go along with managing your mental health. But do you deserve a second chance with her? Absolutely not, in my opinion. There's no way you should force yourself back into her life simply because now you understand what's going on mentally. And she has no obligation to let you back in. She doesn't owe you a second chance for any reason. You were not managing your mental health and you freaked out on her. And that's not her fault or her responsibility to take care of. So in my opinion, I think you need to take her breaking up with you as a serious endeavor and move on with your life, because clearly you have some kind of obsession with her and you think maybe I can get back with her. Maybe I can change her and she'll see what I really am now. But in reality, the more you try to contact her, the more creeped out she's gonna be. Like seriously, that relationship is over and it's time to move on. She very clearly does not want to engage in any kind of conversation, and she herself is probably hoping that you will just stop. So honestly, you'll be a lot better off if you just leave her alone. She is trying to move on with her life, and if you were wise, you would do the same for yours. A father calls our restaurant to make sure that his children left a tip, which really impressed me and really makes me want to meet this guy in person for his generosity and his charity. So for a bit of background, I work at the main restaurant of a pretty large resort in Texas. An important thing to note about our resort in particular is that we have a membership program where in exchange for a monthly price, you and your family would have access to all the resort's facilities, get special privileges, and have your own discount to use. As you would probably guess, these memberships aren't at all cheap, and our members are usually really wealthy business people with lots of time and money to burn. A lot of these members also have children or grandchildren that also have permission and privileges at the resort as well. Also, most of the members are also locals in the area, living pretty much right next door to us. It goes without saying that many of these people are indeed somewhat entitled and expect a lot from us because, well, they pay tons of money. Of course, that doesn't mean they're allowed to treat us like lesser beings, but we are expected to do what we can to accommodate them to the best of our ability. However, there are many of these people who are actually very sweet and charitable people, despite the wealth that they come from. Anyways, on the day our story takes place, I was operating the restaurant host stand and was somewhat bored due to it being a bit of a slow day. Enter Jack and Jill. One was 14 years old and the other one was 11. And these two siblings had parents who were members at the resort. While I'd never met their parents in person, I knew the kids very well, as they would frequently come to the pool bar that I worked at during the summer. They walked up to the host stand with two very expensive looking scooters in tow, which they apparently got for Christmas. They wanted to order food to go, which was one of my duties as a host, so I did as I was told, and I gave them the check to sign while they waited for their food to arrive. Now, I'll mention that while my job in this position is just to bag the food and hand it to the customer, there is still an option to leave a tip. Unsurprisingly, this isn't a thing that often happens, because while a waitress would serve you drinks and check in on you, I would just be handing you your food. But some people are charitable enough to give something. Strangely enough, Jack and Jill said they wanted to leave us a tip and were calculating it together. While the tip wasn't groundbreaking in any way, everything counts, and I thanked them before sending them on their way. Now, I thought that would be the end of it, until about 10 minutes later, when I get a call from our phone. It was the kid's father, calling to ask if his children had been by to get food and if they left a tip behind. I actually laughed, because his kids were sitting patiently at a couch, waiting for the food as we talked on the phone, and I told them that they did. He also laughed and asked me how much they left and thanked me. He told me that he has been teaching his children the importance of leaving a tip for service workers like myself, and how to calculate the amount you leave behind. He called just to make sure that they had done what he had asked, and if the amount was correct. I told him thank you for caring so much about us, and he gave me a nice goodbye before hanging up. It made me smile to think there were people out there, especially those probably in better financial positions than others, who are taking the time to teach their young children the importance of leaving a tip. I've met other children just like this, some even younger. I even met the daughters of our resort's owner, who was nothing but polite to everyone and left a tip for our waiter. She was probably only 10 years old at the time, and that still sticks with me. Honestly, it gives me hope, knowing that the next generation is being set up with this kind of knowledge, especially so early in their lives, and I'm looking forward to seeing this more. And I really hope to meet this father in person someday. Taking the time out of your day just to call a restaurant to see if your kids left a tip for their server is something I'll always think about fondly. That really is a great story in my opinion. It's always nice to see that people are willing to give tips to service workers, especially people who work in the restaurant business, because that can be really rough sometimes, especially in the United States, where you really do rely on tips to try and make ends meet. So it's personally really good to hear that the original poster got a tip for their service, and hopefully this continues at the job they're working. My boyfriend keeps changing his mind on marriage, and it's really stressing me out, and I don't know if I should stay with him. And at this point, I don't know what to do. So my boyfriend and I are together for about 3 years, both of us in our mid-20s, and we met on a dating app. I was going through it at the time, as I just got my heart broken by a guy I was seeing for a few months and became extremely depressed. So we didn't discuss anything like marriage or kids initially, as I honestly didn't think this would last more than a few months. Fast forward a few months, and he out of nowhere asked what I think of marriage and would I ever want to be married. I panicked because I thought he was about to propose, and then got extremely emotional. I started crying because I was still not over that previous guy completely, so he backed out. As time went on, I became extremely attached to him, eventually moved in, and thought he was the one for me, as he was caring and thoughtful, as well as completely respectful of my boundaries. Over time, I started thinking about marriage more and more. We attended his older brother's ceremony, but none of our friends are getting married, so I don't think I'm influenced in that way. He kept brushing off the questions, saying he doesn't feel that way yet and that he needs time. In the last year or so, I felt more and more like he is stringing me along, not wanting to let go, but not ready to move on himself. We are planning to move, maybe abroad eventually, but recently during an argument, he admitted he's mainly doing it because I want to. He's constantly saying he's not ready to marry yet, but maybe in the future he would, though he never specifies when or how he would get there. Eventually saying that if we decide to have kids, then it would be time to get married. And I'm feeling very anxious about having kids, and he knows it. So even that doesn't feel like a real thing. I kept pushing, and eventually he admitted that he's scared of commitment, as well as not being able to leave once we have a house and kids together. And he also wasn't sure if he wanted to break up with me, and he wouldn't want to do that if he made this kind of commitment. I am generally feeling more and more terrible about myself, and overall feeling really depressed and anxious constantly about it all. I can't help but have the thoughts that if I was just a better girlfriend to him, if I was smarter or prettier, he would want to marry me on the spot. And it's honestly such a destructive mindset. My mother is also very invasive evasive, constantly pushing that maybe he is not the guy for me, while also questioning why is our relationship not moving forward, with the implication that he simply doesn't love me. And I don't want to let it get to me, but it does. My boyfriend generally says that he wants to be with me long term, and that he does love me. I just don't know if I can settle for never getting married, or if this is just an insecurity that I have, or if this is a sign that the whole relationship isn't working, and I'm just hyperfixating on the marriage part. There were times when I considered leaving him a lot, but I generally have nowhere to go. I come from a household that was very awful to me, where my parents were belittling me and did not accept any of my choices. So I ran away to live with my boyfriend because I was afraid of my future. I really do love him, and currently I'm not feeling okay with leaving him or finding someone new, because we have a lot of history together, and I always imagine him being the one that I settle down with. Should I work through the marriage thing myself, or is it time to leave? What should I do? This is definitely a tricky situation, because it sounds like you do want to get married, but your boyfriend is kind of dragging his feet about it, so I can understand where you're coming from. But I think it's also important to remember that you're both in your mid-20s. Maybe it's just me, but you're still very young. You've got a lot of time to figure things out, and just because he's hesitant on getting married right away, or at least in the near future, it doesn't mean that you can't still be with him. And if you eventually know that, yeah, you don't want to be with this guy, then you can let that be your answer. And I don't think it makes you the jerk or any kind of bad person simply because you're trying to figure your life out. So I think some healthy communication could really go a long way in this situation, because once you sync up your timelines for the both of you, you can really understand what it is you both want and then move forward from there, whether staying together or finding someone new. My girlfriend is constantly asked to clean our house whenever she comes over, and she is now upset that she has to do that, and she is now refusing to come over, and I honestly don't know what to do. So my girlfriend and I are both 22 years old, and we've been dating for 6 months now. At her house, she does all the cleaning for her siblings and picks up after her brothers, because both of her parents work very long hours. My mom is a stay-at-home mom, so she takes care of all of that. My parents never expected me to clean or do any house chores. When staying over, my girlfriend asked me where the mop was. I didn't know, so I asked my mom, and she told me to go tell my girlfriend to clean. The same thing happened another day when I asked where the vacuum was. She said the same thing again, tell your girlfriend to clean. And I didn't tell my girlfriend what my mom said at the time. My girlfriend purchased her own supplies and has been cleaning the bathroom, the floors, and the kitchen when my parents weren't home. My girlfriend wasn't sure where we kept our laundry supplies, so I decided to help and do the laundry. Usually my mom just does everything. Last week when my mom saw me doing the laundry, she got angry and stopped me. She told me not to do it and tell my girlfriend to do it instead. My mom complained that my girlfriend never cleans the house. My mom even said that it was a woman's job to do all the chores and doesn't want me to do any. And obviously I got annoyed when I heard that. My girlfriend ended up overhearing a bit of this, and I told her what my mom said. My girlfriend was upset that she is expected to clean my house when I'm not. She told me that she's upset that I'm not expected to clean at her house or at my house, but she is at mine. As a side note, her family wouldn't allow a guest to clean anyways. It simply is not good manners. She thinks that this is unfair and that this is all because of her gender, and she doesn't want this to be the norm. Yesterday, I asked my girlfriend to visit, but she didn't want to visit me because she feels she is expected to clean a second home when she works full-time and a lot of overtime. I told her that I don't expect her to clean my parents' house. She pointed out that she already does clean, but I told her that I never asked her to do any of this. Now my girlfriend is more upset with me. I honestly really enjoy when my girlfriend visits me at home, but now I'm kind of at a loss and I simply don't know what to do. It really sounds like your mom in this situation is being super toxic. Like, why on earth would she expect your girlfriend to clean your house? How is she possibly expected to do that? And your girlfriend is 100% correct. Her gender absolutely plays a role in this. Your mom is basically saying, oh, because you're a guy, you don't have to clean up after yourself and you don't have to do your laundry or anything like that, which honestly is not the case. That is simply not how the world works, especially with the idea that the woman is supposed to clean up everything. I mean, that's just atrocious. This is not some 1950s garbage, and it's really disgusting that your mom would have these kind of notions that she's seriously trying to force on your girlfriend. So honestly, your girlfriend is right to stay away. That is until you have some kind of conversation with your mom about respecting your girlfriend. I mean, she is a guest in your house. Does she really expect her to clean up the whole house instead of you pitching in like you try to do and try and do your laundry or clean up the kitchen? I mean, seriously, what an outdated mentality. So maybe having some kind of conversation with your mom and saying, hey, I really don't like you talking to my girlfriend like that, or forcing her to clean up the house instead of allowing me to do it. And in that same vein of thought, maybe it's time to step up and start doing it yourself. Show to your mom that yes, I can take care of myself as an adult, and I don't need you to do everything for me. So hopefully that conversation goes well, because the way your mom is treating your girlfriend is really inappropriate, and her behavior is simply unacceptable. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.